When this guy comes to the training grounds for the first time, he slashes a wooden dummy with ease. His every movement is precise and fast. As a finishing move, he infuses mana into his sword and completely destroys the dummy in 3 strikes. Lucian thinks he impressed his teacher with that, but Swordmaster Aizen just laughs and says, "His moves are utterly pathetic. Our boy is dumbfounded. He has a unique body, making it the ideal vessel for mana. He can push his mana efficiency to the absolute limit and become the strongest swordsman in the entire world. Yet his swordsmanship teacher calls him pathetic." Turns out our boy has 2 problems. He swings his sword like a mercenary, and it takes him too long to infuse it with mana. Even such a talented body isn't omnipotent. An experienced mana user would easily destroy him in a fight. Then Aizen shows him what real sword skill looks like, and turns the wooden dummy into dust with a single strike. After that, he tells Lucian to train tirelessly if he wants to reach the same level. A few days of training pass, and Lucian finally gets the opportunity to spar with Aizen. He attacks as hard as he can, but the sword master deflects everything with one hand. Lucian tries different moves from every direction, but nothing works. Aizen blocks it all with ease. Even a powerful strike from above fails, and Lucian gets thrown back. That's when Aizen moves forward to attack with a mana-charged sword. If Lucian fails to block it, he's doomed, so he charges his own sword as well. Their blades collide in a burst of mana. Lucian manages to counter the attack, and even knocks Aizen's sword back. The swordmaster is shocked. He's never felt such powerful mana before. The progress this kid made in just a few days is insane. When their training ends, the entire training ground is shattered, making the servants wonder what kind of training they were doing. Lucian sits nearby, looking at his trembling hands and his shattered wooden sword, and he regrets only one thing: if he had received the same training and teacher in his past life. As a mercenary, he wouldn't have died so miserably without even a chance. A mercenary who doesn't die is third-rate. That's what they're told anyway. Mercenaries get paid the big bucks because they're expected to break for their masters. It's the same bullshit every sellsword hears. In Jake's eyes, all nobles are cut from the same cloth. When they're desperate, they open their coffers. Promised Land whisper about titles. When things fall apart, they change their tune. Suddenly it's excuses, blame, and hollow righteousness. Jake has heard plenty of unconscionable things from highborn brats, but nothing compares to what he's being asked to do now. The noble-born commander-in-chief's final order is suicide, plain and simple, as captain of the Fong mercenaries. Jake can't help but laugh. A piece of trash mercenary like him is expected to die with the honor of a knight, entrusted with a so-called final mission. The army has been beaten into the dirt. The city burns, the castle crumbles. Rebel blades are already at the Crawford family's throat, and there's nowhere left to run. Jake is ready to cut his losses and disappear. If even the Empire's most talented commander has given up, what's the point? It's a shame the only decent, noble Jake ever met has been reduced to this. The plan is simple. When the rebels launch their final assault tomorrow, Jake and his men are to stand beside the commander and hold the line until the Crawfords escape. If that fails, Jake is permitted to flee. Once the commander dies, payment comes in the form of a precious gem, enough to fund the Fong mercenaries for 3 years. Jake refuses. Just because he smiles a lot doesn't mean he's an idiot. This order turns his men into meat shields, meant to buy a few extra seconds for their masters. Everyone knows the rebels won't show mercy to the Fong mercenaries. The commander insists otherwise, but that's a lie that won't stick to the rebels. Jake and his men are sworn enemies. Over the course of the war, they've done plenty to earn that hatred. They disguised themselves as corpses, waited among the dead, then rose to slit throats from behind. Honor never mattered, only results. Jake has killed countless commanders this way. It's the only reason the Crawfords survived this long. The rebels likely want Jake's head more than Lord Crawford's. The commander knows this. That's why Jake and his men are such perfect bait. When Jake refuses to comply, the commander threatens to kill him and seize control of the mercenaries by force. Faced with the blade of the Empire's most skilled knight, Jake prepares to fight. So this is what the most honorable man in the Empire looks like now. No apology could excuse it. Oddly enough, this suits Jake just fine. It's easier to kill a piece of shit than an honorable man. There's no bitter taste afterward. His best option is to offer the commander's head to the rebels and run, but he knows better. This man has already prepared countermeasures for that. Maybe the rebels would accept 2 commander-level heads in exchange for the Fong mercenaries' freedom. Jake is willing to offer his own life. He dragged those boys into war out of selfish ambition. They crawled out of the gutter together, chasing a dream they trusted, and followed him through hell. For that he bears responsibility because he's their captain. And that's what a captain does. Hearing this, the commander is reminded of what leadership truly means. Shame grips him in another life. He would have gladly served someone like Jake instead of the Crawfords. There's no more time. Jake attacks. The commander doesn't move. He asks Jake never to forgive him and then cleaves him down. The gap between them is overwhelming. Jake's head is severed in an instant. You can't defy this wretched thing called talent. He hopes it will be enough. His men were ordered to run if he didn't return. He lived by the sword, dying by it feels fitting. As his thoughts fade, one question lingers. If he'd been born with the same opportunities as a noble, how far could he have climbed? Then there was nothing until consciousness returns. Jake opens his senses to a boy's frantic pleading. Before he can make sense of it, a heavy hand slaps across his cheek. Jolting him fully awake, a boy stands over him, crying genuine tears and calling him Master Lucian. He couldn't help but feel like something was terribly wrong here. First of all, his scarred, experienced and battered like an old rag body is gone. In its place was a young master's form so pristine and fresh. It smelled of fresh grass. Secondly, who the hell was this snotty brat, who slapped his cheek while wailing at the top of his lungs? The boy thought he had passed away. The boy's heart couldn't handle that. As a personal servant, he would have been executed and buried next to his master. Most of all, it would be a massive tragedy for the family. Jake couldn't fathom what the guy was yapping about. Young master's personal servants, family, none of those have anything to do with his life. The last thing he remembers was his bloody death. How in the world is his head still attached? His brain went into overdrive, judging the situation and scanning the surroundings. He concluded that somehow he had entered the body of a complete stranger. This stranger just happened to be a pretty boy with a killer face. He couldn't help but admire himself in front of the mirror. From his flawless looks alone, he was radiating waves of nobility. The decor suggests it belongs to a scion of a household that reeks of money. In need of more info, he dug through some foreign memories and remembered his servant's name, Hans for starters. He asked Hans what year it was. The boy answered that it is Imperial Year 845, exactly 15 years before Jake died. He's returned to the past so as not to arouse suspicion. He made a mental note not to be surprised by every new information. First, he needs to do what needs to be done. For his next question, he asked Hans if he had a death wish. Hearing that almost made the boy soil his trousers. How dare a mere servant touch his master's unconscious body? Without permission, threateningly, he asked the boy to remind him who he is. With a deep bow, Hans apologized for committing such grave rudeness against young Master Lucian Valdec, third son of the great House Valdec. Lucian recognized the noble name instantly. The Valdec family is a pillar that has supported the empire throughout its long history. A historically prestigious clan, positioned as the emperor's closest aides, they boast power equal to that of the imperial family itself. 15 years ago, young Jake worked as a guard for this very estate. Instead of returning to his old job, he's reincarnated as the third son of the Grand Duke instead. All his life he was forced to endure every humiliation imaginable, for the sake of coin because of his low-born status. Now he's being handed a golden opportunity out of nowhere. Perhaps fate expects him to figure out the answer to his dying question. If that is what the gods want, they had better open their eyes wide and watch. For the first time he took in the warmth of the sun as Lucian Valdec. He'll show the powers that be how high he can climb, and how he will live. Lucian put on some lavish clothes and exited his room. He's been to all sorts of places in his mercenary days, but none could compare to the Valdec Grand Duchy in terms of splendor. He'll need to get used to all these shiny things as soon as possible. He noticed that since earlier, all the servants had been looking at him funny, whispering amongst themselves. It felt like enemies surrounded him. According to Hans, this was only natural. After all, he's lived his life in seclusion. Until now, he's been locked up in that room for a year and 2 months already. It sounds crazy to him that a noble kid who can have anything he wants would retreat from the world. Mind of a highborn is a mystery to him. Acting as one would be nearly impossible. In this place the mighty giant who has protected the empire resides. Grand Duke Sigmund Valdec. That man is not the type to stand by and watch his son bed rot for more than a year. Either this Lucian is a problem child, abandoned by the family, or there is some special circumstance making the Grand Duke look the other way. It would be best to avoid meeting his father for a while, but that might be a bit difficult now. Head butler Edwin has come to personally greet the young master. This gentleman entered the castle as a hostage from a hostile family. In his childhood, he was recognized for his outstanding executive abilities, and rose to be Grand Duke Sigmund's right-hand man. Out of everyone, this is the person Lucian must avoid the most. He would undoubtedly notice the behavior of someone from the bottom rungs of society. Thankfully, Lucian has been a recluse for more than a year. In that case, might as well emulate the most noble human he knows, his killer, the commander. With a warm smile, Lucian thanked Edwin for his concern, and noted his significant recovery. In addition, he came out to look into the family affairs he had neglected. In his absence, the head butler was momentarily stunned by his eloquence. He was relieved that the young master remained unchanged. Thankfully, Lucian's noble act seems to have worked. He tried to get out of the situation as quickly as possible, but Edwin stopped him from excusing himself. Right now the Grand Duke wishes to see his son promptly. Lucian was brought to his father's study. Grand Duke Sigmund is a very intense man. Right now he's asking Lucian why he's still alive. Naturally, Lucian was stunned by the out-of-pocket question, courtesy of his supposed father. The Duke intended to overlook all his stunts for the past year. He used his mother's death as an excuse to forego his duty as a noble, acting like a spoiled child, but he finally crossed the line that he should not have crossed. Not content with staging a process by locking himself away out of the public's eyes, he attempted to harm himself, treating his own life lightly. Come to think of it, Hans's fussing and crying earlier seemed earnest. He wanted to insist that there must be some kind of misunderstanding, but his father had grown tired of excuses. For the last time, Grand Duke Sigismund wanted to hear all the thoughts he'd kept hidden in that narrow mind of his. Why would he use his weak body and limbs to shove sleeping pills into his mouth, to cause a commotion? He worked in this great estate for a long time. No wonder he specifically had no memory of Lucian. 15 years ago, when he was but a humble guard, the Grand Duke family's third son, Lucian Valdec, tragically suffered an untimely death. The Grand Duke famously fathered 4 sons with 4 different mothers. Unc was just busting raw and spreading his seed left and right. Jake worked for the prestigious family for 10 years, and naturally, ran into the young lords and their mothers on multiple occasions, but he had no memory of ever meeting Lucian or his mother face to face. Lady Valdec died of a severe illness early on, and her son eventually followed suit. Due to an unknown reason back then, Jake, the guard, assumed that the mother and son just rolled an unlucky dice. Sickly and frail, Lucius's real cause of death must have been covered up, given his mother's passing, his unstable position within the family, and a myriad of other depressing reasons. The burden must have grown too much for the young man. He eventually chose to ingest sleeping pills, just shy of a lethal dose. In truth, he was just trying to get even a little bit of attention from his father. It was a cry for help, however. He failed to account for the damage his year-long seclusion dealt to his frail constitution. Unable to tank the drug's effects, Lucius Valdec accidentally drew his last breath. The new Lucius must maneuver his way out of this delicate topic. The Duke sounds a bit cruel to a neglected son he hasn't seen in a year, and the scolding felt a bit harsh. No matter how stoic Sigmund presents himself, he's still a father. His insides must be churning. But this is not the time to be considerate of someone else's feelings. Lucius is on the verge of falling off the noble cliff. He might not get another chance to redeem himself if he says the wrong thing. When the Duke gives a final ultimatum, you'd better believe that he'll follow through. Lucius could practically hear the sound of cracks forming in his promised golden future. He doesn't give the Grand Duke a satisfying answer to his actions. He would be sent away as a priest in a remote monastery. At the minimum, he's not ready to say goodbye to the secular world just yet. The worst outcome would be getting dragged to a harsh northern territory, suffering the bone-chilling cold of snowfields and the appetite of starving beasts for a lifetime. He's barely a few hours away from getting his neck sliced and restarting a new life. Yet the first real dilemma has already reared its ugly head. Lucius refused to let some convoluted family affair ruin his precious second chance, so he spoke out, just as his father ordered. First he offered a sincere apology for smearing the Valdec name with his foolishness and causing great concern to everyone, especially his dad. He admitted his fault and promised to willingly accept whatever punishment the Grand Duke metes out, but that won't be enough to move one of the most powerful men in the empire. Instead of playing to his father's paternal senses, he urged the Duke to rejoice to his heart's content instead. What happened in the past is irreversible. Instead of tying his life salvaged from the brink of death to the past, he intends to live diligently for the bright future ahead. His stance, conviction and confidence really sold his words. Instead of a lecture, he implored the man before him, not as a Grand Duke but as a father, to offer one word of encouragement. Lucius believes that a child who is in the wrong must sincerely repent before their parents, and that the parents must willingly embrace such a child. Isn't that the proper duty between fathers and sons, bound by the laws of heaven? Head butler Edwin was quite stunned by the eloquence of the young master's speech. He felt the drastic change in the kid's aura and atmosphere. Lucius acted and sounded vastly different from the feeble kid, who was always cowering. The young man in front of him was an entirely different person. After considering what the boy had just spilled, Duke Sigmund did not appreciate being lectured on the duties of a parent. Even so, a brief and faint smirk could be seen across his face. Listening to his boy made him realize that he's lived long enough to truly see everything. Hearing his father's stern voice soften up ever so slightly, Lucius inwardly sighed in relief, as he expected. Instead of bowing and cowering clumsily, ramming into his father boldly was the correct decision. Rather than a rat that constantly tiptoes on eggshells, the Grand Duke values the spirit of a wild dog that knows how to attack decisively. His decade-long service to Sigmund Valdec is coming in handy. Right now, the Duke never expected to hear his most damaged son be so brazen. After coming back from the dead, since Lucius mentioned diligence himself, Sigmund asked his third son about his plans from now on. Picking his words with intent, Lucius answered that the first step would be fixing his broken body. First and foremost, after that, the image of the most talented fighter he's ever teamed up with and fought flashed in his mind. Once his body is back to a healthy state, he intends to learn the sword properly and to take it seriously. This time around he reckoned that eating and sleeping diligently would eventually restore his vitality, and everything would work out somehow. The scowl in the Duke's face was erased. He was impressed with his son's surprisingly adept rhetoric. Whether everything Lucius said is just empty words or not, time will tell. To get him started, Duke Sigmund allowed head butler Edwin to give the kid something that should help, rather than a few words that won't resonate at the moment. Lending a helping hand to a reformed shut-in would be more useful. Edwin accepted his orders and estimated that the process wouldn't take long. Lucius was the only one in the room who had no idea what the old farts were talking about. It did not take too long to understand what his father's helping hand looked like. Multiple carriages pulled up to the castle and unloaded their heavy cargoes. Helpers carried countless wooden chests and lined them up in front of the estate. Tucked inside each of those chests were unfathomable riches, ranging from gold coins to precious jewelry. Lucius had never seen such bountiful resources, even when he was working as a mercenary. Is this what being a high noble means? He was granted a tremendously huge allowance without doing anything. This whole treasure trove was just for a single month, with golden coins lining his pockets. Perhaps it's worth a shot to invest in something revolutionary, something that could overhaul his weakened body. He can already picture himself flexing and mugging everyone in the empire. All he needs to do is craft a very special elixir. After meeting and talking with his third son, Grand Duke Sigmund felt the urge to walk around his pristine garden. Edwin followed him around while he collected his thoughts. According to the head butler, this is the place the late Grand Duchess, Lucian's mom, cherished ardently before she passed. The Duke had not visited this nostalgic place in a while. It's obvious why he chose today to change that young master. Lucian's abrupt change must have reminded Sigmund of days past. Even though the kid fell out of his father's favor for a moment, the Duke still has a soft spot for the boy. He is the child of the Grand Duchess, whom the Grand Duke cherished the most. After all, upon arriving in the middle of the beautiful garden, Sigmund commented on how pathetic his son had become. The kid was always busy rolling his eyes around, as if afraid of everything around him. He would whine like a beaten dog if Sigmund raised his voice, even just a little. Lucian's attitude had become so different from the late Duchess. Sigmund almost gave up on him. He had considered that the only resemblance Lucian shared with his mother was his appearance. But Sigmund's opinion of the boy changed for the very first time today. The thought that he might have been wrong occurred to him. After that meeting, Edwin must have seen the drastic change too. Instead of cowering, that child looked his father straight in the eye and bravely stated his opinion. He did not waver under pressure and showed a truly resolute backbone. But they knew from the jump that Lucian had a tender heart. Maybe he just bloomed a little later than his brothers. After all, he inherited the Grand Duke's blood. Even so, Sigmund remains wary of getting his hopes up. From now on, he will assign Lucian tasks that can never be solved with just a few eloquent words. On that note, Edwin brought up a problem that may arise. They resumed the flow of support funds into Lucian's pocket. This fact had already been leaked to the outside. Upon investigation, Edwin found that the second young master, Jordi Valdec, was involved. Furthermore, Jordi had already made his move. He dismissed Lucian's head maid and placed his own close associate in that position of power, showing blatant intent to keep his little brother in check. Sigmund understands that his second son harbors deep feelings against the little one due to maternal matters, but his persistence is worrisome. Edwin offered to intervene, but the Grand Duke prevented him from lending a hand, even though it might be too harsh on someone who had just started taking his first steps. Jordi's malicious actions are just petty tricks. That would not have worked if Lucian had managed his surroundings properly sooner. They can just consider this a price that the third one must pay for not coming to his senses faster. Sigmund wants to see how his child would handle an issue like this. For the time being, if Lucian fails, then that's on him. The blood of the Valdec family is the key. But opening the door must always be done by one's own power. That's the way of the lion. A few days later, Lucian had gone back to locking himself in his room, with Hans manning the door, sparking worrisome gossip among his staff. It has been 3 days since the halted support funds started flowing. Again, when those stacked chests arrived, Hans could not believe his eyes. The young master attributed the free flow of gold to the fact that the talk with the Grand Duke went well. Considering the tarnished relationship between father and son, Hans could tell that it must not have been easy for the young master. At all, personal servant could not be prouder, seeing his boss move forward instead of wallowing in sadness. Unbeknownst to Hans, Lucian's mind was reeling with the possibilities this much wealth could unlock. With an abundance of resources, he might have just enough to completely overhaul his weak body. The ideal physical form is within his grasp, if he can successfully synthesize that elixir. It took him a mere 3 days to burn through the support fund, converting his room into a dingy drug den. He's been working non-stop to perfect his methodology. Hans must be full of curiosity by now, but seeing him guard the door well without questioning his orders exemplifies loyalty. On Lucian's work table were brewing tools that a son of a Grand Duke would never have touched in his life. All around him were crates of absurdly expensive herbs that only grow under moonlight, the rare moonlight herbs. Common usage hasn't even been discovered at this point in time. Lucian squandered his entire monthly allowance to purchase as much as he could. To everyone, Lucian might look like a crazy person right now, but a year from now this decision would pay dividends. The price of moonlight herb would skyrocket by 10, no, over 20 times over. He's basically buying up flower-shaped Bitcoin in 2010. Now that he's working on extracting the value from this miracle herb, on his own, he's gained a newfound respect for the Alchemist Guild, for their boldness. When they started experimenting with moonlight herbs, success must have been unclear, but they still took a chance, and scraped up all the moonlight herbs in the empire. He took the gamble of a lifetime, with the guild's fate on the line. Thanks to that boldness, the alchemists would release an unprecedented elixir that shook the empire to its core. People refer to the miracle drug as the drink of the gods' nectar. Due to the arrogance of attaching God to a mere drug, the Alchemist Guild faced the danger of blasphemy charges from the church. But once nectar's efficacy became known to the public, everyone was too busy trying to get their hands on it, that the charges of blasphemy were forgotten. After 3 days of grinding it out with his alchemy set, Lucian finally concocted a successful batch. Nectar challenged. a proposition that had never been denied for over 1,000 years. The realm a martial artist can achieve is supposed to be determined the moment they are born. For the longest time, that limit was considered an absolute law that one can defy. Innate nature was supposed to be predetermined, and one's constitution can never be changed. The established common sense was swiftly shattered into pieces. Thanks to nectar just by drinking one vial, it can transform those with zero talent into a capable warrior. The one he hastily concocted in his room falls short of the original's efficacy. He's not a real alchemist after all. He only knows how to make the mass-produced type. But this bottle should be more than enough to repair his severely broken body right now. He got lucky that he was thrown back in time for this to be a possibility later. When the chaotic era sparked across the empire, the first thing that burned was the Alchemist Guild. Authorities deemed the nectar recipe to be a destabilizing force that threatens the balance of power. Men sitting on their thrones worked hard to erase the original recipe from history. However, some people managed to gather enough clues to cobble up something similar. One of those people was Jake the Mercenary. Most guys who tried to experiment with the moonlight herb died from its side effects, but he succeeded without hesitation. Lucian opened the vial of freshly brewed nectar and downed its contents. In doing so, he had become the first human to transform nature's power into his own. Depending on how well the process of circulation goes, he could harness the influx of mana spreading throughout his body to evolve. The quality and power one can draw out differ starkly from person to person. Borrowing the miraculous power of nectar, he started forcibly widening the blocked paths inside his body. Lucian thought that the effects of the drug would cease once his paths were opened, but he was wrong. Typically, one should feel excruciating pain due to the intense process, yet he felt completely fine. On the contrary, an abundance of mana is spreading unhindered all throughout his body, seemingly finding and settling into its rightful place. Even the body of a newborn baby usually contains impurities that would block the circulation. At some point, is it possible that Lucius Valdec inherently belongs in the realm of naturally gifted geniuses? As the sun began to set, Hans's nervous back and forth pacing could be heard outside Lucian's room. Finally, the door that had been locked for the past few days cracked open. The young master finally stepped out of his seclusion and asked Hans if anything had happened while he was locked away. As usual, the crybaby servant ran up to his master in distress. Hans repeatedly tried calling out to the young master, yet he never received a reply. All he could do was guard the door day and night. He was terrified that something had happened, or that Lucian had regressed to being a recluse again. But that could not be further from the truth. The young master's eyes have become sharper than ever before. Being the one who knows him the most, Hans could tell that something definitely changed. Lucian felt and looked like a different person on the outside. There won't be any big changes yet. Under his fancy clothes, he's still a scrawny kid. Skin and bones, proper nutrition and time are still needed to amend that. What really matters is the change inside. Currently his heart is bursting and pumping the purest mana. Internally he's undergoing changes at a rapid pace. Lucian's natural constitution made this result possible. Feeling nectar's unhindered effect, he's become certain that his body's potential puts him in the same category as legendary figures who change the world if everything goes well. He might even surpass his peak as a mercenary captain in under a year. Since Hans helped him immensely the past few days, he feels indebted to the dude in a way. He believes that reward and punishment must always be made clear. Grabbing the boy by the shoulders, he urged Hans to listen carefully. He advised Hans to empty out all his savings down to his underwear and dump it all on a very lucrative investment from the ground floor. Do that, and Lucian promised to give the poor servant the easiest money he could ever earn. Feeling like a gracious saint, Lucian promised to include Hans as the investment rises to the moon. He was completely serious. Back in his day, there weren't any nobles who would look out for a servant like this. A week after drinking up the miracle drug, Lucian felt in the mood to take a stroll around the peaceful forest. Nearby he was whistling and humming all throughout the stroll, while Hans looked at his young master like he had gone insane. Lucian was just appreciating such a heavenly lifestyle. He never would have thought that life could be this comfortable. In the Duke's estate, scrumptious meals would show up whenever he wanted to. Feast like a king, his room would be cleaned and maintained, spotless without him lifting a finger. The maids would even prepare his bed without being asked to. When he was but a humble mercenary, going hungry was part of his daily routine. Thanks to the convenience of nobility, he's been able to focus entirely on his body's recovery. He also settled an issue that had been nagging at him. For the past week, he's done the research regarding the existence of Jake, who was supposed to be employed as a guard of House Valdek. In this timeline, upon checking with the current captain of the guards, he found that no one, even resembling the man named Jake, had ever applied. The shift and spot he used to work on for a decade is now covered by some other guy he's never seen before. For now, this is for the best. There's nothing good to be gained from running into his past self. It might even serve as a distraction. Besides, he doesn't have the guts to face what he used to be back then. He would probably die of embarrassment on the spot. Once they arrived near their destination, deep in the tranquil forest, Hans expressed his doubt about continuing forth. The Lucius of the past always hated setting foot on the training grounds. The current him doesn't mind at all. Hans reminded his master that, ever since Lucius was scolded by the second young master last time, he swore to never come back to the rotten place again. Judging from Hans's reaction, it's easy enough to picture what happened back then. For a noble child of the Grand Duke's house, training in the way of the sword is a basic requirement. His older brother Jordi must have used the training grounds as the perfect place to knock him down a peg. Under the name of sword training, he planted pure terror in the mind of young Lucian, making sure that a rival for succession would never take another step into the training grounds again. It's easy to guess why Jordi would do such a cruel thing, but there's no need to worry about that now. Everything that happened in the past belongs to the past. It's time to overturn that fear. All Hans has to do is have a little faith and follow his master closely. Inside the training grounds, the Knights of Valdek were abuzz upon hearing that the third young master had come to their sacred ground of his own volition. One Mustache Knight was particularly annoyed that the brat of the Valdek family dared to set foot on the training grounds. He sees this as an opportunity to remind the kid of what happened last time he tried coming here. First and foremost, he sent someone to report the third son's arrival to the man overseeing the grounds. Mr. Mustache will make sure to prepare the meal nicely before the boss arrives. Upon entering the facility, Lucian saw a place beyond what he could ever dream of. There were plenty of spare weapons organized in racks. There's no need to worry about breaking them in training. The space and the stage were wide open, perfect for serious movement. It's ridiculous to think that all this is just one person's private facility. If he and his boys had the opportunity to train in a place like this, perhaps some of them might have lived a bit longer. His reminiscing was interrupted by the grating voice of the mustache twirling knight. He expressed his sarcastic surprise at seeing the third young master enter. Mr. Mustache made sure to remind Lucian of what happened the last time. Young Master Jordi schooled the third son in front of everyone. He compared the incident to a lamb being chased by a wolf. The mustached knight sneered and covertly mocked Lucian for bringing a servant into a sacred ground. For warriors, he goes by the name Hendrik, and even his introduction contained a thinly veiled mockery of Lucian. A year ago, Hendrik personally guided Lucian's swordsmanship lesson alongside the second young master. He found the experience enjoyable. The same couldn't be said for Lucian of the past. Apart from his big brother, this Hendrik fella had a hand in instilling a deep fear of swordsmanship into the third young master. The current Lucian could not be more different than what he was in the past. With this mustached bastard flaunting in front of him, things just got very interesting. Traditionally, knights are hailed as the embodiment of honor and loyalty. They are usually born into noble families, trained strictly in martial arts and etiquette from childhood. Once they gain enough merit through battlefields and missions, they can officially receive knighthood from their respective lords, elevating their status as a true knight. In Lucian's opinion, knights are nothing more than expensive hunting dogs, wearing their master's fancy collars. They are obligated to show courtesy and curry favor to lords and highborn bloodlines, who can provide them with wealth and honor. This arrogant bastard in front of him, Hendrik, can't even do that right. Lucian's poor standing in the family probably plays a part in his poor treatment, but he has the balls to be an ass, mostly because of the man backing him. George's leash makes him feel untouchable. In all honesty, Lucian would love to give this clueless idiot some intense training, break his mindset down from the ground up and whatnot. He'd have a ton of fun toying with this man if given the chance. Unfortunately, he must keep in mind how his father would react if he went overboard. Like it or not, knights are the core fighting force of a noble house. They are valuable assets. Any punishment deemed improper would only create needless tension between lord and vassal. Lucian can't go all out just yet. This is not the right time. With a clear tone he spoke up. He can't keep avoiding the training grounds, just because of a little incident from the past. He announced that from now on, he'll come by more often to learn sword forms. He's already wasted a whole lot of time rotting away. He's got a lot of catching up to do. Hearing the third young master mention learning sword forms made Hendrik cackle. He asserted that it's far too late to be learning sword forms. Given Lucian's age, he explained that past the age of 15, starting from the bottom would be an impossibility for a 16-year-old. Shut in, it's basically over. Sword forms are secret techniques and legacies, left by those who came before them. Just by following the movements invented by the ancestors, the new generation could gain insights. They could also refine the body, illustrating ancient wisdom at its finest. But sword forms are only accessible to people with an open path of mana. To begin with, according to Hendrik, those mana paths close after 16. If Lucian starts now, it would be nothing more than physical exercise. Sword forms without enlightenment are akin to an empty shell. Completely useless. Perhaps that would suit the third young master. More useless training for a useless noble. He can even become the Empire's greatest dancer while he's at it. That way he can save time finding what he's really suited for, instead of mindlessly swinging a sword. Hendrik also proposed that Lucian should just spend his days tending to the gardens. Everyone has a role they must play in this world. After all, judging from the silence of the other knights, it seems like they support Hendrik's mocking. The mustached knight was quite proud of himself for knocking a noble boy down a peg, rendering him speechless and unable to say a word. In truth, the claim that the path of mana closes at 16 years old is a blatant lie. It is something that could be easily exposed with a bit of checking, but that doesn't matter to Hendrik. If he's ever called out, he can just play dumb and smooth it over quietly. His real goal is already achieved. He just wanted to thoroughly crush the hopes of a foolish kid who can't even argue back. Every knight in the training ground sees Lucian as a pathetic worm, terrified and frozen in place, even while being mocked by a mere retainer. In response, the third young master played along and replied with a meekly trembling voice. He alleged that Hendrik's claim sounds a bit different from the texts. As far as he knows, the path of mana closes not at 16, but at 25. There shouldn't be any problem if he's to start now. Hendrik rudely asserted that he was in the right. Lucian pounced and implicated his big brother, Geordie, by asking if Hendrik's boss shares the same view on the issue. Dumbass Hendrik confidently answered that his boss would back him up. He didn't even know that he had just fallen into a cleverly laid trap. Lucian lamented that House Valdec must be on the road to ruin. These days he even included clueless Hans in his performance. The third young master complained that this foolish knight in front of him couldn't even understand the most basic thing, that even a stray mutt in the streets would know. Just how many promising talents have had their chances stolen by ignorance if the knights of his house can't even retain a fundamental truth in their tiny brains? The next generation of knights is doomed. Thanks to Hendrik's loose tongue, Lucian could push the blame onto his dear brother's empty skull. If Geordie runs his training grounds with such ignorance, then this is a disgrace to the house and a clear crisis. Surely a mere vassal like Hendrik would never try deceiving the Lord's own son. After hearing Lucian's spirited rant, Mr. Mustache stumbled a little. Being accused of deceiving the son of the Grand Duke is a serious matter. There is no way that a knight of the Valdec family would do something so petty. Is they're afraid of saying the wrong thing? Hendrik stood by his earlier statement. Lucian intends to pursue this matter seriously. This level of oversight cannot be overlooked. It's time to show this big-time knight what happens when he wags his tongue the wrong way. Sir Hendrik does not seem to realize how serious this matter is at all. If he simply wanted to humiliate Lucian, benevolent young master would have graciously let it pass. He's willing to admit to the fact that Hendrik, and everyone else in this place, look at him with hostility, due to his own faults, for forgetting his noble duties and wasting time in vain. He would never rebuke his people for holding him accountable. Apart from that, if the knights and his brother, the pillar of a grand duchy, are hindering the recruitment of talent with incorrect knowledge, Lucian won't sit idly and turn a blind eye. Ignorance would cause cracks in the military power of the esteemed Valdec knights. Strictly speaking, it could bring grave danger to their people. In so few words, Lucian turned the tables and spun mockery into an honorable speech. As one who proudly carries the Valdec name, it is only right that he be outraged by such malpractice. He laid out his argument nicely, and made dumbass Hendrik understand the gravity of his words. He had better prepare his mustache for the blowback of this encounter. Lucian threatened to report this incident to his father, and request an internal crackdown against Geordie's vassals. Hendrik could not believe what had just happened. The kid who used to tremble at the slightest mockery is fighting back. Lucian used to be as frail as a baby lamb just a year ago. Now he's like a hungry wolf, an apex predator that could crush little old Hendrik without hesitation. Seeing the commotion, the owner of the training ground was forced to intervene. Geordie Valdec, second son of the Grand Duke, finally came out to play. Hendrik was close to shitting his pants. While Lucian was glad that his big bro just came right on time, Geordie looked at his little brother with blatant revulsion. In a panic, Hendrik hurriedly ran towards his master's side. To explain what was going on, he stumbled over his words, struggling to come up with an explanation that would clear him of any faults. Having had enough of his nervous stammering, Geordie made him shut the hell up. There's no need to explain. Geordie had been watching from a distance all along. He saw and heard Hendrik's disgraceful behavior with his own eyes. The knight ought to be ashamed of himself for being swayed by a child who's barely half his age. Geordie was utterly disappointed. Squeezing the knight's shoulder extra hard, Geordie ordered him to fix his ugly expression, unless he intended to put his master in an even more difficult position. Hans cowered behind Lucian as Geordie walked toward them. The faint-hearted servant trembled, while the third young master looked his big brother dead in the eyes. Seeing Geordie for the first time in a long time, Lucian mocked his big bro's face. Geordie Valdec is widely regarded as a noble among nobles. He's famous for having a dogshit personality, even back in Lucian's first life. Since his influence was far weaker than the Grand Duke's firstborn, Geordie resorted to recruiting outsiders to his camp. Most of them would meet horrible endings. Once Geordie deems a tool useless, he would routinely frame them for crimes or cut them loose. For now, Lucian gave his big brother a polite smile and a proper greeting. It has been a long time since they last talked, so he gave some generic platitudes. Without mincing words, Geordie called Lucian a foolish creature. He claimed to have watched everything transpire since Lil Bro stepped foot on his training grounds. Geordie accused him of daring to act in a way that tarnished the dignity of their revered family. Lucian maintained his act and asked Big Bro to elaborate on his accusation. Geordie excused that it's been a long time since Sir Hendrik studied theory, so the earlier interaction was simply a misunderstanding. Still, implicating his honorable name to stir up unnecessary confusion was a clear mistake. For that, Hendrik cannot be free from responsibility. However, Geordie has no intention of rebuking or punishing his man for a minor incident, because unlike his useless little brother, he claims to know the weight of loyalty and how much blood Sir Hendrik shed for the family. Furthermore, someone who ran away, unable to endure even basic swordsmanship training, has no right to criticize and blame a real knight. Geordie insisted that Lucian must first learn respect for their vassals before throwing allegations. It is only thanks to the dutiful knight order that Valdec can exist and rule. Geordie turned to his men and sincerely apologized on behalf of his little brother for today's commotion, deeming Lucian's words an outburst of an immature child that must be shown leniency. He promised to take special care of his foolish younger brother. Lucian was quite impressed with how Geordie handled his verbal attack. The guy's brain works pretty fast. Lucian specifically directed his insults and accusations at Geordie, but the second son slyly twisted it into an insult against the knights, riling them up while saving face in the process. Today was just a warm-up. I'll give props to Geordie for handling the issue at hand. Hand on chest, Lucian acknowledged the misunderstanding and appreciated Geordie's choice to refrain from a rightful scolding for daring to insult an older brother. He pretended to take Geordie's words to heart, regarding them as precious guidance, even while praising his big brother. Lucian found a way to call him an empty-headed fool backhandedly. He expressed shame for saying such embarrassing things earlier. branding himself as a younger brother. Eager to learn from Big Bro's kindness, Lucian exaggeratedly praised Geordi, ordering Hans to record Big Bro's teachings at once. Paper simply won't do. Such words must be embroidered on the finest silk. Doing this serves two purposes. He's using Geordi to wipe away Lucian's weak image, while carving a new and solid impression into everyone's minds. This is a rebrand. The pathetic third young master no longer exists. In his place is a man who knows how to play the nobility game. With that said, Lucian excused himself, asking Geordi for permission to leave. There's nothing good waiting for either of them, if they keep bickering in front of the vassals. After all, Geordi didn't lose, but he could not help but feel infuriated by Lucian's silver-tongued, rage-bait tactics. He wanted to keep the little shit in his territory a little longer, for a harsher lesson, but Lucian reminded him that their father has been monitoring him closely. These days, starting from zero, he's got absolutely nothing to lose. The same cannot be said for his brother. He turned around and took Geordi's silence as consent. Lucian grabbed Hans and bolted out of the training grounds unimpeded. He enjoyed bantering with Geordi for a bit, so they're taking their leave now. As soon as Lucian was out, Hendrik tried to spur his master, Geordi, to prevent him from walking away untouched, and that was the worst thing he could have done. Right now Geordi is bursting with rage. He knew that he had been played somehow. Lucian and Hans took the same scenic route they had taken earlier. The personal servant felt quite uneasy, knowing that they had offended the second son. Lucian knows better than anyone what the second young master, Geordi, is capable of. Hans is afraid of the possible retaliation from that monster. Even if they somehow get lucky this time, there's no guarantee that they will be fine next time. Hans looked like a helpless animal, terrified of being hunted. Lucian understood why Hans was behaving like this. The kid is going through something that only those who've worked under nobility would understand. When a useless superior makes a mess and washes their hands of any fault, the little guys usually get left behind to suffer. There's nothing more infuriating than a master who doesn't give a fuck. Lucian knows the feeling all too well, and he won't let little Hans go through what he went through. He assured his servant that a mere knight won't be able to touch them. He simply won't let that happen. Over the past few crazy days, Hans had it rough. Lucian is thankful for all that he's done. When a master acts like an idiot, it's always the ones below who get crushed. As the eccentric young master's attendant, Hans must have suffered quite a lot. To assuage his fears, Lucian promised him one thing from now on: he won't let his people be looked down upon. They will never live in fear. Despite their master's seemingly foolish actions, Hans took the second young master's promise to heart, and took his supporting hand. Back in the Valdec estate, Lucian is out and about alongside his trusty attendant. After the training hall incident, he found it odd that things had gone eerily quiet. He's aware that Geordi is not the type to just sit back and take a beating without retaliation today. Lucian found out the petty trick his brother has been cooking up. In the background, he received a piece of paper that made him angrier than ever before. Oddly enough, even the usually docile Hans could not let the contents of that paper slide. Master and servant marched, like they had just suffered the vilest injustice possible. That brother of his dared to touch the one thing that he should have never touched: Lucian's allowance. Hans was only on board because even his salary was deducted. Lucian woke up earlier this morning in high spirits. He knew that the letter detailing this month's budget plan was arriving. This is the day when he's supposed to buy extra moonlight, herbs, and stock up on necessary supplies. His account was supposed to be replenished after last month's spending spree. At least that's how it should have been. But upon seeing the figure on that piece of paper, his smile quickly faded. He was so shocked that he lost grip of the document. According to the budget summary, his allowance has been cut by 75. Similarly, Hans's salary was reduced by 30. But that bastard Geordi dared to fiddle with his numbers. Through the head mate he planted in Lucian's annex, it was unforgivable they dared to do this, knowing that embezzlement is a felony punishable by severe execution. Even in noble society, Lucian admitted that he was partly at fault. The only reason his brother could pull off such an absurd stunt was because of the gap in his defenses. After the passing of the third Duchess, Lucian entrusted budget management to someone else. Dana, the former head maid, who had stayed by the family's side for a long time, diligently managed the budget with proficiency. Not long ago, Dana was replaced by that green little head maid, currently running Lucian's house. Today was the first time he had ever met the new head maid, face to face with a smile on her face. She gave a polite greeting to her supposed boss. She introduced herself as Jenny. She wanted to greet the man of the house when she was first appointed, but back then, Lucian didn't seem to have any intention of coming out of seclusion. It's a good thing that the long period of rotting in bed is finally over. Hans did not appreciate her tone. When speaking to the young master at all, Lucian conceded that Jenny didn't say anything out of turn. Today he wants to skip all introductions and small talk. He came to the maid's quarters to discuss more pressing matters at hand. To deal with the funding issue swiftly, he chose to ask direct questions to Jenny. He asked if she was the one who drafted the absurd budget plan for the month. In response, she stifled a chuckle. Jenny proudly admitted that she was the one who wrote the entire thing. She cited that Lucian ceded full authority to the former head maid. Upon assuming Dana's responsibilities, simply carried out her duties as they were handed to her. Jenny slyly declared that she feels a bit perplexed by the young master's questioning when she's worked so diligently all this time. After all, organizing the budget plan was originally a task that the master of the house was supposed to do himself. Lucian knew that Jenny would use that fact as an excuse. His negligence is partly to blame. Once again for that, he must admit that it couldn't be helped. However, something still doesn't add up. According to the budget plan, the majority of the funds his father reissued were somehow allocated to raising every servant's salary. Since his house staff suffered due to negligence, he's willing to consider the money loss as compensation. But if that's the case, then why was Hans's salary cut instead of raised? Even a child would see that this was a blatant financial attack, orchestrated by the young head maid. Jenny played dumb and insisted that there must have been a mistake. She used the struggle of managing a household as an excuse for such an oversight. She urged the maids working under her as witnesses to testify to how overworked she's been. Seeing how they froze under her gaze, it's plain to see that Jenny had already taken over the house. Through the staff with frantic smiles, all the maids hurried to defend Jenny's decision. While praising Miss Jenny, they even promised to assist the head maid better from now on. To avoid such oversight, Lucian sighed in defeat and retreated with Hans. The one time Hans expected his master to push back, but he didn't right now. The body of the house is under Lucian's name, but the hands and feet of his annex are listening to someone else. Before walking out of the maid's quarters, Lucian shot Jenny one last question. He hoped that she would answer carefully. He directly asked her who her master is. To answer that question, Jenny insisted on consulting her Lord Geordie first. The way Lucian sees it, tissues that have festered must be cut out for the body to live, and right now his heart is rotting from the inside. The cure for that rot might be found in a tavern, located in the shady streets of Valdec territory. Covered by a dark cloak, the third young master dragged Hans into the dubious establishment, under the guise of going fishing, to calm his mind instead of the open waters. They entered an underground fighting den filled with degenerate gamblers. Instead, in the middle of the tavern, was a ring where fighters duke it out for the patrons. If you ask Lucian, this is the perfect place to fish. Who knows, maybe they'll catch a big one today. Strolling past the main event, he walked towards the empty bar. The bartender saw him from afar, and immediately warned him that this place is not for kids to snoop around in. Lucian complained that a gambling den shouldn't be picky when it comes to customers. What if that customer turns out to be flush with cash to gamble with? As soon as he showed his face, the attitude of the bartender shifted positively. There are a few reasons why Lucian didn't have the head maid beaten with a paddle in front of the whole staff. First, Jenny is not just a simple employee. She's got some serious backing. She's the daughter of the wet nurse, who practically raised Geordie since he was a baby. He sees her as a sister. Touching that woman carelessly would only fan the flames into a larger problem. Second, the hierarchy in Lucian's annex was an absolute mess, worse than he imagined. His current predicament is far beyond common sense, and it requires a fitting prescription. Lastly, his father, the Duke, is watching. There's no way that man is unaware of the budget interference. In other words, fixing the chaos in his household is just another test that he must pass. He'll just have to show the Grand Duke and his staff what he's got under his sleeve. To get things rolling, he decided to take what remained of his diminished allowance and hit the tables in this dingy gambling den slowly but surely. His stack of chips grew as he played every card hand perfectly. The sounds of the dealer's fancy shuffling filled the hall. That's the sound of money flowing back to Lucian's pockets. It's been a few hours since he sat down, locked in and started growing his bankroll. He was winning so much in a row that his table had amassed an audience. He just cleaned out one of the den's seasoned veterans. Without breaking a sweat as a regular of the den, the veteran could not believe that he was cleaned out by a brat. Lucian talked a lot of shit on the table, making him an infuriating opponent to play against. Thankfully the veteran knew when to cut his losses and back off. Hans's mind was blown. He never knew that his master was such an expert gambler. With tall stacks of chips overflowing around him, Lucian demanded a new opponent, preferably someone who could handle him. Aside from lining his pockets with gambling money, he's cleaning out the poor saps in this gambling den. For another reason, by his estimates, the guy he's been fishing for is about to make his move. As expected, the door of the hidden gambling den swung wide open to welcome a new challenger. Lucian's prediction was right on cue. It's about time to reel in the big fish. A burly man walked into the hall, attracting everyone's attention. He sported a rugged exterior and a nasty scar across his face. The man apologized for failing to recognize such a distinguished guest right away, and for the late greeting, he introduced himself as Hugo, the manager of this humble establishment. Hugo snapped his fingers and his dealer sprang into action. They apologized to every other patron inside the gambling den, given that they must close business for the day. To tend to certain circumstances, the trained employees politely led the gamblers out of the den, promising to treat them extra generously on their next visit. Hugo's business is taking a hit from inconveniencing his other guests, but that doesn't matter right now. As long as young Master Lucian can enjoy gambling in peace, it should be worth it. Lucian was genuinely impressed that Hugo recognized him, even though he hadn't been out in public for a while now. Then again, that kind of intuition is a requirement to survive in this crooked business. Once more the big man apologized for the delay in his greeting. Lucian claimed that he just came by for a change of pace, so there's no harm done. Hugo praised his accumulated towers of chips. It's been a long time since a guest of the establishment stacked up a pile of winnings this large. If Lucian doesn't mind, Hugo asked for permission to step in as his next opponent on the table. The third young master goaded the big man to proceed. With a patented customer service smile, Hugo humbly claimed that he's no match for the young master, but he'll do his best to show the few tricks he picked up over time. Surely a battle against the gambling den's manager would be enough to pass the time. Feeling the pressure coming off the big man, Hans whispered in his master's ear, urging him to just cash out and dip, since they already made plenty of money as it is. He has a very bad feeling about that scarred man. Hans had seen plenty of scary people in the castle, so he knew that this guy meant serious business. Hugo's eyes especially struck Hans's heart. Eyes like those are truly rare to come by. Lucian was pleased to hear that Hans's years of working as a servant in a noble house weren't for nothing. Everything Hans felt in his gut was true. Black Shark Hugo might have a gentle smile on the surface. He didn't earn his nickname for nothing. In Lucian's previous life, Hugo's name shook the underworld like a natural disaster. His path began in the dark, back alleys of a city under Valdec territory. He used his rough and sturdy body to make his enemies bleed. Equipped with both violence and clever schemes at his disposal, he became an unstoppable force. It didn't take too long for Black Shark Hugo to rise in prominence and infamy. He got his hands on gambling, smuggling, and even contract killings. He would dip into every crime that pays the best. With his ruthless methods, he eventually expanded his operation and became known as the King of the Night, ruling over the underworld of 5 territories. Later, he would use the impending collapse of the empire as a stepping stone into something more public-facing. With expert political maneuvering, he claimed the title of Baron for himself. He was one of the first ones to adapt to an age of chaos, evolving into one of the empire's fearsome warlords. But right now, Black Shark Hugo is nothing but a rookie in the underworld scene. That doesn't change the fact that he's a damn dangerous guy. Today it's time to lower the bait and catch a wild shark in the bloody waters. With a deck of cards and a mountain of chips placed on the table, Lucian proposed that they play a simple card game. Hugo agreed and added that they shouldn't set a betting limit. He can't let the Valdec family's young master get bored with small stakes. After all, Lucian happily agreed to the stipulation. He's just glad to find someone who speaks his language properly. Internally, Hugo sees Lucian as a typical brat, who only acts tough because of his family name, a clueless cub, who doesn't even realize that his jolly words will serve as the noose that will tighten around his neck. Deafening silence filled the room, as the dealer dealt their respective cards. Truthfully, he didn't expect the brat to clean out the dealers from earlier. Even so, Hugo could use Lucian's winnings to his advantage. In his eyes, an immature kid, drunk on a little bit of victory, would only fall deeper into misery once they start losing. Hugo is itching to bleed this carefree, noble brat dry with each hand they play. Before they could start playing, Lucian acted as though he had just remembered something he needed to do. Before they start trying to bleed each other's wallets, Lucian would like to ask Hugo a question. This is their first time meeting, but the young master already finds the criminal mastermind quite likable. One can judge a leader just by feeling out the atmosphere around their subordinates. It's evident that this gambling den is not exactly a legal operation. Managing an underground business at this scale is no small feat. If Hugo crosses the thin line of legality, the Valdec family would undoubtedly hear about it, and a purge would have likely happened long ago. Hugo insisted that he knows his place, and is careful not to offend the higher UPS. Lucian may be a member of the Valdec family, but he assured the Black Shark that he's not the uptight type. Instead of beating around the bush, Lucian demanded an honest answer. He wanted to know when Hugo plans to start mass production. Without as much as flinching, the Black Shark asked what exactly the kid was referring to. When Lucian mentioned that thing being prepared in Vestra, Hugo felt his stomach drop. The third young master of the Valdec family casually dropped the nuke that he knew about, the illegal hallucinogen Hugo had been working on. The truth bomb sucked the air out of that underground room. Even the guards posted at the door were taken aback. Out of everyone, Hans might be the most stunned, and it shows Hugo dropped his cards on the table as his brain started formulating a proper response. Ultimately, he chose to play dumb, but his stammering made it evident that he was shaken up. While playing with his chips, Lucian doubled down with his accusation. With a sly smile on his face, he added that he also knew that Hugo was commissioned by Marquis Logan. The hallucinogens were formulated to shake up the Valdec territory, with illegal drug distribution. He's not appreciative of the Marquis' cheap tactics at all. In his opinion, there is a line that should not be crossed between noble families. He asked Hugo if he shared the same opinion. Given Lucian's view of this betrayal, it would be more fitting to see the Black Shark as the more impressive one. Who else could have the audacity to dare commit such a heinous crime in Valdec territory but him? If one little thing goes wrong and he gets caught, everyone associated with the Grand Duchy would try to tear him apart, limb from limb. Every single muscle at the Grand Duke's disposal would hunt him, like a dog without exception. Right now Hugo's mind is a mess. If he says the wrong thing, he risks death and complete exposure. In these parts, the Valdec family is the worst possible opponent one can have. Normally this matter would not have been revealed to the world. For another 2 years around that time, the Grand Duke received a report detailing the spread of a new drug in his territory. Jake was one of the soldiers deployed to raid the Black Shark's base, but they were too late. Hugo had already fled the city, leaving no trace of illicit activities in his den. Lucian's experience of getting screwed over back then turned out to be quite helpful now. Even with all the cards on the table, Hugo insisted that there must be some sort of misunderstanding. He insisted that he's just a lowly manager, making pennies at a small gambling joint, that he would never dabble in drugs with conviction. He asserted that some jealous competitor must be spreading false rumors to sabotage him if given the chance. He promised to uncover the source of that rumor himself, since the big man refused to bend. Lucian added a bit more detail to the story. He asked Hugo whether the rice mill he had been operating was just another ordinary shop, and whether the underground passage that connected right outside the castle was just an innocent escape route. For one last time Lucian demanded an answer to his first question. Are they nearing the mass production stage? Hugo slumped in his chair. Somehow he was cornered into a checkmate position. The kid knows about the fake store and the secret passage. If he knows that much, excuses are essentially useless now. Cornered like a wild animal, Hugo considered killing the third son of the Duke right then and there. His men had already drawn their hidden weapons. A noble brat with no guards can be easily killed in one stroke. Lucian urged the Black Shark to think carefully, before doing something he might regret. They are gambling with their lives as chips. After all, he reminded Hugo to consider his next move. Given how he climbed to his position, the big man dismissed the foolish thought of killing Grand Duke Sigmund's son if he's caught, and there's a good chance that he will be. Hugo would be put in a position where begging for death would be the merciful way out. To save his skin, he swallowed his pride and dropped down to his knees. With utmost sincerity, he begged to be spared from the wrath of the Grand Duke. He could tell that there was a reason why the young master came to find him personally, instead of kicking down his doors with a battalion of knights in tow. If the rest of the Valdec family knew of his crimes, his head would have flown off long ago at this point. If Lucien told him to be a dog, he would be a dog. If Lucien tells him to bark, he will bark. If ordered to crawl, he will crawl. Hugo's men lined up behind him and joined their boss in bowing down and pleading. The man who's destined to become one of the most powerful people in the Empire's future had been reduced to such a state. After brief consideration, Lucien stood up from his comfortable seat. Keeping such a useful dog by his side doesn't sound so bad at all. He just happened to need some proficient hands and feet at his disposal. After all, hearing this, Hugo vowed to follow his every word. But Lucien doesn't want that. For a man of Hugo's caliber, it would be a bit boring. He knows that the black shark would never be satisfied as a mere hunting dog. Meeting the pleading man eye to eye, Lucien proposed a better deal for all parties involved. He asked Hugo if he wanted to try becoming a knight instead. Hearing that word stirred some deep-seated emotions inside the black shark. Like every other boy, he once craved the dream of becoming a knight like crazy. Eventually, he had no choice but to give up on that pipe dream. As time went on, the reality of life became clearer to him. No matter how much skill he built up, how strong he became, and how many times he risked his life for a master, he's nothing but a low-born peasant. In their eyes, he was just a useful tool, a lump of muscle to be used and abused by those with real power. Because of factors outside his control, the circumstances of his birth, he cannot achieve his dream, no matter how much he bled. To answer Lucien's question, of course he wanted to be a knight. He wanted it so bad that he would willingly bash his head on the floor for the opportunity to become one. If he could achieve that dream, he would even sell his soul to anyone who could make it happen. In front of Lucien is a vulnerable man clinging to a boyhood dream. In the name of the Valdec family's honor, he promised to help Hugo become a real knight. He can possess the integrity and honor to never be ashamed of himself. In the future, mere status won't become a stumbling block. At that moment, Lucien's brilliant visage was burned into Hugo's mind. He offered to give Hugo the chance to live as a person, not as a mere tool. A few days after that gambling den encounter, Lucien arranged a meeting with all his house staff and his annex. He introduced a new addition to his growing team. To his attendants, Hugo stood by him as a capable talent, newly hired from the outside. In contrast to his master's casual demeanor, Hugo introduced himself with vigor and confidence. He says he's looking forward to working with his new seniors, but his terrifying face disturbed the staff. The maids and butlers didn't know how to appropriately respond to the young master's sudden announcement. With the introduction out of the way, Lucien intends to move on to the main event. He ordered his people to bring the head maid, Ginny, into his office at once. The butlers immediately recoiled. Upon hearing the young master's command, Lucien cited that it's only fitting to introduce the new hire to the head maid. After all, they can't have a messy conversation like last time. He simply wanted to report the news to the so busy Jenny first. As expected, his entire staff reacted as though they answered to the head maid, and not to him. The internal situation is already beyond repair. With normal methods, not a single maid or butler heeded his order. To them, Lucien looks nothing more than a rotten rope with no real power. He'll have to orchestrate a show of power, so convincing to take back control over his own house. One of the butlers stepped up and pleaded for Lucien to consider their situation. As well, everyone in this annex is aware that head maid Ginny is favored by Lord Geordie. She's taken over the house and the staff completely. Butlers and maids dare to protest against their useless lord for insisting on fanning the flames and putting them in a tough spot. They would have preferred living quietly like before. When all the young master did was decay in his bed, Hans could no longer listen to these lowly servants. He roared at everyone to wake the fuck up. and remember their forgotten duty. The master of this house is young Master Lucian, and not that red-headed bitch or that insufferable Geordie. After watching the madness from the sidelines, Hugo firmly grasped the current situation, and offered a simple solution. Since the young master's sharp words seem too good to be wasted on these stupid-ass servants, he can bring a more effective alternative. He's heard enough and grasped what must be done. Hugo assured his master that he would handle the problem. For those who can't distinguish between high and low anymore, the method to imprint loyalty is awfully simple. He advised that his way could get a bit rough, so he needs the boss's permission. Lucian was pleased with how fast Hugo's brain works. That's the primary reason why he went out of his way to recruit. The big man luck was truly on his side this time around. Hugo was still in the early stages of developing the drug. If it had progressed any further, he would have never been able to bring the black shark over to his side with utmost confidence. He gave Hugo permission to do precisely what they've both been thinking. He gave his new confidant the green light to turn up the intensity as high as necessary. To get things started, Hugo walked over to the protesting butler, towering over the puny servant. Looking at the black shark up close would make anyone tremble in fear. His intimidating frame and killer gaze overwhelmed the senses. He looked like the type who would commit heinous crimes. The butler convinced himself that Lucian must have picked up a back-alley thug. He smugly offered to give the big oaf some advice, as someone who knows the situation in this house, and cautioned Hugo to choose the right side. The smug butler tried, scaring Hugo off with the threat of young Master Geordie's cruelty. All these servants believe that the scales have long since tipped away from Lucian. Surely, the giant thug won't be foolish enough to risk his life over a few coins, right? Hugo found the smug butler's last words pathetic. His bald fist found the butler's face and rocked his shit clean. A single hit was all it took to rearrange that guy's skull. The power behind the punch was so compact that it sent the smug butler flying into the nearest wall. Like a rag doll, Hans's eyes almost fell out of their sockets. While Lucian pats himself on the back for hiring such a beast, Hugo slowly walked over to the butler's limp body. A single casual punch was all it took to factory reset that guy, using violence. The other butlers fearfully lambasted the new hire for using violence. Inside the castle, the black shark was entirely unaffected by their empty and feeble words. It just so happened that Hugo specializes in educating crazy bastards. This is the perfect first assignment for him. Few moments later, no signs of dissent could be gleaned from the house staff. They even followed the third young master's order to bring head maid Jenny in, even if they had to use force. With a visible slap mark across her face, Jenny snarled and assured everyone that they won't get away with treating her like this. Instead of cowering to her empty threats, the re-educated butlers told her to shut the hell up and walk. Accustomed to being in charge, she was not used to people raising their voices at her. She kept on yammering on about punishing those who oppose her, only to stop when the door to Lucian's office opened. Laid before her was a ridiculous scene. The maids and butlers, under her influence, have been forced to kneel on the floor to reflect on their blunders. The fear they felt for Jenny has been overridden by the terror Hugo showed them. Meanwhile, the third young lord stood by the window sill, with hands resting behind his back. Aura farming and Lord Maxing. He turned to face the restrained head maid, and gave her a smile and a wave. He's glad to see that his employees are finally doing their job correctly. Lucian noticed the slap mark on her cheek, and excused the boy's enthusiasm. Jenny erupted in anger, confident that her meager young master wouldn't be able to get away with treating her like this. She refused to bend before Lucian, as everyone else did, and repeated that her young master, Geordie, would never let this stunt slide. She had the audacity to state that if they stop now, she will let today's incident end without serious repercussions. All Lucian could do was laugh. He nonchalantly grabbed the whip from his desk and walked towards the unruly maid. Why end a good thing when they're only getting started? The day is young and his whipping hand is itchy. He urged head maid Jenny to say whatever she wanted. She should get everything out of her system while she still can, because before today ends, she'll be knocking on hell's door. Execution is a method used since ancient times to warn wrongdoers. It is both showy and efficient. The blade has justification, a clear target, and above all, it leaves a lasting impression on those who witness the drop. In other words, it's a tried and true ritual. Lucian walks over to head-maid Jenny with his whip in hand. She glared at him full of scorn and disgust. He looked back with apathy, his gaze without a single flutter. Today he can signal to the Grand Duke that the weak and pathetic third son no longer exists. He called his butlers over with a finger wag. They grabbed Jenny tightly to keep her in place, and forced her to kneel down on her knees. The woman who just moments ago had complete control over the house was pinned down, unable to move. Even in such a compromised position, she dared to speak against Lucian, refusing to believe that the boy wouldn't have the balls to back up his threats. She firmly believes that if anyone lays even a single scratch on her, young Master Geordie wouldn't just sit back and watch. Jenny flaunted the fact that her mother was Geordie's wet nurse. They grew up together like brother and sister. At this point Lucian had grown bored with her empty warnings. This is her last chance to repent, yet she insists on repeating the same tired line over and over again. She dies, while uselessly chanting the name of Lucian's brother till the end. Wouldn't that be such a laughable existence? If Jenny has any other cards in her back pocket, now would be the time to play them. Like a broken radio, she continues yapping about what young Master Geordie would do. Lucian had to step in and correct her misguided view of the world. He already has plenty of justification to kill her. She's charged with the crimes of insulting a noble, negligence of duty, incitement, and embezzlement. And with the list of crimes she committed, she must be crazy to believe that her little, wet nurse connection with Geordie would save her. She's sorely mistaken about her place in this world. At best, the Geordie she keeps on bringing up could hit Lucian a few times, and that's it. And if the Grand Duke intervenes, he won't even be able to do that. On the contrary, their father might even reward Lucian for properly handling a runaway colt that was causing internal problems in his house. Jenny must be forgetting that Geordie is just another heir to the duchy. That same title belongs to the person right in front of her. On their first meeting, Lucian clearly gave her a chance to clear things up. Instead, she chose to sit on her high horse with blatant disrespect. She brought this situation upon herself. Hearing the third young master lay out the facts shattered her delusion for the first time since she was brought in. Jenny trembled in fear, desperate to save her skin. She admitted to her wrongdoings and begged to be spared. Unfortunately, she'll just have to consider herself unlucky. Lucian made that whip work at full power. The sound of flesh tearing and blood splattering filled the office. Word of Jenny's capture quickly reached the ears of the second young master. Alongside his knights, Geordie hurried over to Lucian's office. Worry was evident in his face. He couldn't believe that his useless little brother would take such drastic measures. Just a few days ago he heard from Jenny that the kid retreated after being humiliated in the servants' quarters. Now he's threatening to kill anyone who opposes him. That's not the only thing puzzling Geordie. In case something like this happens, he planted some people in Lucian's detached residence. Those planted servants should have tried their hardest to stop Lucian taking Jenny's side. But the situation has reached the point of no return. In a single day, Lucian gained control over the entire annex, including those who were supposed to answer to Geordie. The knights assured their young master that the reports must be mistaken, so they should calm down for a moment. They think the cowardly Lucian doesn't have the temperament to harm anyone. Above all, they still believe that the third young master fears their lord, Geordie, more than anything in the world. Upon hearing the presumed facts, Geordie calmed down. That was until they heard the sound of a whip ripping into flesh, and the agonized scream that followed. Geordie forcefully slammed the door of Lucian's office open. His eyes immediately darted towards the whip, dripping fresh blood all over the floor. Lucian stood behind Jenny. Her back was full of gnarly lacerations, as blood freely flowed from her fresh wounds. It was a sight that Geordie could have never pictured in a million years. Even Geordie the Cruel was taken aback by such a painful scene. When he made his presence known, Lucian simply asked what brought his esteemed brother to his territory. He apologized for not receiving them properly. He's just a little busy right now, so Geordie and his knight could just come back later. Uprooting the source of disobedience in his house could be hard to stomach for some. Dismissing his brother's presence, he asked Hugo to set Jenny upright. Once again, the second young master instructed his knights, Oliver and Gert, to jump in and bring Jenny to his side immediately. Over and Gert heeded their master's call and dashed forward. In response, Lucian gave Hugo an ominous mandate. If anyone dares to come within 3 steps from his position, Hugo is free to slit the headmate's throat. Lucian would gladly take all responsibility for the aftermath. Seeing his deranged eyes, Oliver and Gert promptly halted their steps. With a sharp blade in hand, Hugo assured his boss that he had the throat-slitting covered, so young Master Lucian could rest assured. The tip of the blade grazed Jenny's flesh, spilling more blood. All she could do was cry out for her dearest Lord. Geordie, the second young master, implored the black shark to drop the dagger at once. He declared that failure to follow his orders would lead to the beheading of not only Hugo's head but his whole family's as well. Their severed heads would be hanged on the city walls. Hugo didn't even blink at Geordie's puny threat. His master is Lord Lucian. He has no reason to obey orders from anyone, else no matter what happens later, he will act upon his duty and follow his master's will. Geordie immediately realized that he had no power in this situation. He redirected his question to Lucian, confronting his little brother about what Jenny had done to deserve such harsh treatment. Lord Lucian quickly listed her crimes of insulting her superiors, disobeying orders and meddling with the house's budget. He is merely imposing a fitting punishment. He urged his brother to come to his senses and distinguish between public and private matters accordingly. In doing so, he effectively put Geordie in an impossible position. According to the current succession structure of House Valdec, the first heir in line is Lord Tristan Valdec. Trailing after him is the second young master, Geordie Valdec. There's a two-way power struggle that's solidified in place. In other words, until the final confrontation, the most important thing for Geordie is consolidating his power base. His recent public humiliation at the hands of his little brother caused him to suffer some losses. He had to cast out a close knight in Hendrik. If he fails to protect Jenny, who's practically viewed as his right hand, it will destabilize his standing in the succession race. His ineptitude would mark a turning point, leading to distrust and cracks that could easily form and spread among his followers. In other words, he was completely checkmated. Realizing this, Geordie conceded to Lucian and earnestly asked for Jenny to be spared. His knights, Hans and every servant in the room were stunned. Hugo was built different, though he kept his eyes on the prize and his hands on the blade. Lucian found his brother's grandstanding ridiculous. One word from that bastard is not nearly enough to sweep this matter under the rug. After letting someone tear through his precious household, mere words won't suffice. Geordie must think his tongue is plated in gold or something. Once again, he's proven that all nobles are the same. For now, he played along. He asked Geordie what conceding the win means to him. There's no win to be had in this scenario. Lucian is merely fulfilling his duty as the third young master. Nothing more besides the head-made committed crimes that spare no one, regardless of status, if they just cover this issue up and move on. What will everyone think of the Valdez family? Lucian claimed that he too would like to let these matters rest, but his hands are tied by law. He simply lacks the justification to go against the grain and overlook flagrant offenses. Geordie gnashed his teeth and balled his fist. He pushed Lucian to stop beating around the bush and just say his demands. The third young master cited that since ancient times, laying hands on another's wealth has typically been punished similarly. Maybe he would be willing to let this matter go if the accused returned multiples of the amount that was stolen. Given a satisfactory price, Lucian might find it in himself to forgive and forget. It's up to Geordie to cough up an exorbitant amount. After the commotion died down, things returned to normal in the Valdec house. Grand Duke Sigismund Valdec can be seen mulling over what happened between his sons. Head butler Edwin gave him a comprehensive report of what happened and how the incident was brought to a close. At first, the Duke felt the need to verify if every word of the report was accurate. Edwin was the one who verified the incident report, so Sigmund could be certain that it was factual. In the end, Geordie agreed to pay Lucian a sizable sum, 10 times the amount of the stolen allowance. Edwin's report also included young Master Lucian's new recruit, named Hugo, who swiftly rooted out every spy planted in Lucian's annex. As a result, the third young master has completely retaken control of his house, making it a more heavily guarded place than any other area in the castle. After meeting with Edwin and getting the facts straight, Grand Duke Sigmund called Lucian over for a conversation. heeding his father's call. The third young master came to his father's office as soon as he could. Sigmund gave his son a look over, and sensed that his gaze felt different from before. The Grand Duke asked about the ruckus he caused recently, and Lucian corrected his father by asserting that it wasn't a mere ruckus. He simply educated servants who couldn't even recognize their master's authority, but in doing so he made his brother lose face. Sigmund warned him that Geordie won't forget this incident for a long time. He's unsure whether his third son can handle the heat. Lucian refuted the idea that there is anything to handle or not handle. He's sticking by the story that he merely upheld proper hierarchy and order, as nobles do, if he avoids such an obvious duty out of fear of future consequences. And how could he dare to carry the Valdec name with pride? He simply made a choice that won't bring shame to their family's name. His father seemed to like his answer. The Grand Duke cautioned that Geordie would continue picking fights. In the future it's Lucian's right to strike back if that ever happens. However, he must keep in mind not to escalate conflicts to the point of damaging the house and their reputation. Sigmund also stressed that he would side with Geordie, regardless of who was right or wrong. Lucian rightfully protested such clear bias. His father simply told him not to be surprised by this decision. Geordie may be hasty at times, but he's a competent leader who contributes significantly to the house. In contrast, Lucian threw away an entire year wasting away, instead of racking up merits as head of the family. Protecting someone who actively contributes to the household is the natural order of things. His words might seem harsh, but Lucian could read between the lines. If he's not mistaken, it sounds like his father is telling him to step over his brother and climb up the ladder. Great Duke Sigmund wants him to build up his strength and actively contribute to House Valdec. Do that and he'll find the answer to his questions. Lucian gathered that this man was trying to heighten his sense of crisis, making him run faster. If he's making such a definitive statement at this point in time, it means the succession structure will be set in stone before long. In a convoluted way, he felt touched by his father's roundabout advice to seize every opportunity to rise above his other brothers. Before it's too late, he wonders if all fathers are like this. If the Grand Duke is worrying about his child this much, Lucian decided to throw him a bone and score some points in the process. He slid a document on his father's desk and showed the Grand Duke his next move. It's a really big one at that. The Duke picked up the document and read through its contents. As he parsed through the facts line by line, anger slowly took over his hand, crumpling the paper, deeply disturbed by what he had just read. He hastily asked his son whether the intel was truly accurate, if Lucian fabricated the report out of ambition to gain merit. He must speak now, but every line in that document is the truth without a single lie. In addition, he already secured an insider working to spread the drugs. Under the orders of Marquis Logan, he urged his father to conduct a thorough investigation. Judging from the Grand Duke's reaction, he's about to conduct more than just an investigation. The whole room overflowed with Sigmund's suffocating aura. His rage is leaking out in the form of mana. He cursed Bernhard Logran, that shameless son of a marquis, fellow noble, dared to defile the Valdec territory with dangerous substances. This matter cannot go unanswered. For the first time ever, Lucian felt the power of the sword that protects the empire. The master of House Valdec is not someone you fuck with. At this rate, he might even catch some strays. Getting ahead of his father's anger, Lucian dared to speak up further. He anticipated that, even if they reported the matter to the emperor, the House Logan would have enough time to sacrifice a pawn and escape punishment. All involvement was conducted through subordinate trading companies, the Bawan Merchant Guild. On the surface, there are no traces of the Marquis's direct participation. Moreover, pushing harder and digging deeper would only worsen things. Currently, the emperor is wary of factional conflicts, and the empire will inevitably force itself into the middle of the issue to mediate and intervene. Having calmed down a little, Sigmund was impressed by his son's sharp eye for politics. Lucian reckoned that, despite committing such a lawless act against their great house, Marquis Logran would get away with a slap on the wrist, maybe lose some funds, and that's it. For daring to commit a treasonous crime against House Valdec, shouldn't they at least cut off an arm? After briefly thinking about his son's suggestion, the Grand Duke sat down and reeled his emotions in. He wanted to hear in great detail how the kid would handle such a delicate situation. Fortunately, Lucien came prepared. He already secured a method to trap the Marquise. The plan involves an insider who recently defected to his side, namely Hugo. The man has no title, but earned deep trust from Logan, quickly rising to the executive level. Sigmund recalled hearing something about this outsider from the head butler's comprehensive report. He couldn't help but feel as though his son anticipated the situation from the start. Using a traitor to set a trap in reverse certainly sounds enticing. From the Marquisate perspective, it would be hard to imagine a betrayal in the hands of a loyal executive. Lucien already laid down the groundwork to make it seem as though the production of the drug is progressing smoothly before long. A key figure from Logan will have to step in directly. Considering the political implications of this plan, the matter cannot be taken lightly. Lucien's play sounds ideal, but the plan has a huge flaw. They are basically betting everything on a singular variable traitor. From the back alleys, the Grand Duke reminded his son that human nature cannot be overcome. They cannot take even a single step alongside someone untrustworthy. Lucien debated that it's not that he trusts the man himself, but rather the desire he holds inside him. Hugo is a man who would do anything to become a knight, to make his name known across the empire. He is deeply motivated to carve his name into the annals of history. They could rely on a man who craves a dream madly. Lucien is willing to put his faith in that dream, for he was a mad dreamer in his past life as well. It's a truly sentimental reason, one that the Grand Duke seemed hesitant to support. If the play breaks down, Lucien has no intention of avoiding responsibility. The mistake of his subordinate ultimately falls upon him. Even if he must put his life on the line, he's willing to take his chances. Sigmund could see that his boy means every word he says. For now he intends to mull the idea over. Once Lucien's body has recovered, he tasks the boy to come out to the training ground. Grand Duke finally deemed him worthy of the Lionheart sword. From now on, Lucien will be properly recognized as one of the candidates to become the next head of the family. Later that night, Sigmund worked overtime in his library. He relayed what he had discussed with Lucien to Edwin, and the head butler apologized for the massive oversight. The old man felt ashamed that something so heinous was going down in Kelheim, the heart of House Valdec. Without his knowledge, Grand Duke claimed responsibility for making Edwin focus solely on border issues. The head butler is already stretched thin as he is. They got lucky that Lucien uncovered the travesty before it got out of control. Bernhard Logran poured all his effort to hide his hand. After all this, drugs' purpose was not profit or expanding power. There was a strong intent to specifically tarnish House Valdez's honor. The Lograns likely intend to use such dirty tactics as an excuse to pull schemes later down the line. Despite knowing the current state of the empire, some nobles are still blinded by politics. More importantly, Sigmund wanted a more in-depth report on the man named Hugo. According to Edwin's research, Hugo is a mere thug who manages a gambling den on the surface. In reality, he was the leader of a new organization, quickly taking over the underworld. On paper, he's not the kind of man who would serve under someone, making the third son's feat of taming the black shark even more impressive. Edwin attributed such a masterful move to Lucien's incredible growth. For some reason, the Grand Duke couldn't shake the feeling that there's more to Lucien's change than meets the eye. Hugo stood and thrived in the underworld, where cunning and cruelty prevailed. If he were a chump who would rely on hollow words about fulfilling a childhood dream, he would have been trampled to death long ago. That clever criminal must have seen Lucien's true potential as a lord, worthy of gambling his life on. It is earlier than planned, but since Lucien continues to show his talents, Sigmund saw it fit to open the path accordingly. Starting tomorrow, the Grand Duke plans to pass down the family's secret technique to the forgotten third son. As for who will serve as his swordsmanship instructor, Sigmund already has someone in mind, Sir Eisen, a name that every swordsman in the Empire is familiar with. It is a pity to break the old man's peace in his later years, but taking Lucien under his wing will surely be a meaningful time for him. As well, it's time to pull Sir Eisen out of his solitary retirement training arc. Word about Lucien's formal acknowledgement as one of the contenders to succeed the family head position was sent to his residence. Hans couldn't believe that the young master who was a miserable mess not too long ago, had completely turned his life around. The personal servant clung to Lucian like a crying child. Hugo had to step in and pick him up as if he weighed nothing. Despite the difference in size and experience, Hugo respectfully refers to Hans as his senior. The Black Shark reckoned that given the young master's talent, being chosen to be next in line was only natural, considering the path that their master will take in the future. He urged Senior Hans to act accordingly as Lucian's right-hand man. Being called the young master's right-hand man filled Hans's mind with glorious thoughts. He couldn't stop himself from grinning from ear to ear, while humbly claiming that he's still lacking in many areas. With a capable junior like Hugo around, he wouldn't dare claim the title. Hugo played along with Hans's false modesty act, showering him with flattery while lifting him up and down like a child. The way the Black Shark handles Hans certainly showed the difference an experienced employee could bring. Lucian spoke up in support of Hugo's words. Before the news was officially announced to the rest of the family, Hans and Hugo were the first to hear it from Lucian. He must admit that Hans's gentle nature can be seen as a weakness. At times even so, the kid genuinely cares for his young master. He has the fortitude to remain steadfast by Lucian's side. In the worst days, if he gains more experience and continues to grow, he has the potential to excel at managing internal affairs. He will become a more reliable rearguard than anyone else. As for Hugo, his capabilities are unquestionable. Lucian just needs to pave the way to his knighthood. If he can do that, Hugo's abilities will be drawn to their fullest. The Black Shark will become an even more valuable piece in the future, acting as Lucian's strongest sword. At the moment, it's better to prioritize quality over quantity when it comes to his inner circle. Building his people up one by one as best he can is how he'll win. With the announcement of Lucian's elevated status, things are going to get much busier. He won't be able to navigate the journey ahead on his own, but with these two by his side, he should be able to ascend to a better future. Hugo vowed to never let him down. The weight of his oath was apparent. Hans also promised to be reliable as always. The very next day, Lucian woke up early, excited to enter the training grounds alone. In the middle of the arena, he took in the view and atmosphere. Lucian closed his eyes and contemplated his past life. Back then, he eagerly searched every corner of the continent for one thing. He braved the harshest areas of the empire to seek the essence of ancestral martial arts, said to be capable of elevating a swordsman to a higher realm. He was obsessed with the idea of sword forms. Among the countless sword forms in existence, there exists a higher level. Advanced sword forms. He struggled like a dog, but at the end of his search, what he found was not the advanced sword form he desperately craved, nor the intermediate sword form practiced by knight captains. All he had to show for his efforts was a degraded version, used by novice knights. He was slapped by the harsh truth that real power cannot be achieved without noble blood. Even the paltry chance to learn a degraded sword form, as a common mercenary, could already be considered a massive stroke of luck. Every time he failed to protect his squad members on the battlefield, he was reminded of how small he is. He was further tortured by the thirst and desire for a true sword form. The thing that he so deeply craved in the past is now within his grasp, passed down only to the successor candidates of the Valdec family, and their closest aides is an ancient sword form that far surpasses even that of advanced sword forms. Today is the day. He'll get the chance to learn the coveted Lionheart sword. His mind was racing with possibilities. How great a swordsman can he really become? Knowing that he's inches away from realizing his dream, he actually felt nervous before he could even start. The lesson is still a long way off. He's been so excited since dawn that he's just been pacing around the arena for hours. It would be a much better use of his time to calm his mind with mana circulation before the lesson begins. In his previous life without proper training, he learned swordsmanship by stealing, or by piecing together fragments of knowledge. He never had anyone he could call a master. Day by day he becomes more appreciative of the unique second shot in life he's been given. Lucian sat in the middle of the arena, his legs crossed in a meditative stance. Unbeknownst to him, someone was watching from above. That someone quietly observed Lucian as he meditated in complete silence. It was none other than Sir Eisen. He's been watching for a while now, yet the boy's focus hasn't wavered at all. He figured that something must have triggered the third young master to shed his past self. A boy who did nothing but cower and hide had become a disciplined man. Initially Sir Eisen was surprised by the Grand Duke's summons, with a job offer to serve as Lucian's swordsmanship instructor. Duke Sigismund admitted that he had nearly given up on the child before. He thought there was no hope, but looking at the current version of Lucian, he could glean a lot of valuable aspects from the kid. The Grand Duke presented the job as a brief diversion for the old man. Sir Eisen trusted Sigmund's eye for recognizing extraordinary talent. But more than talent, something else fascinated the Grand Duke. What really surprised him was Lucian's mindset. He cannot put it into words, but he was certain that Sir Eisen would understand what he means once he sees the boy in person. Back to the present Sword Saint. Eisen Brinter is witnessing precisely what Sigmund was talking about. In this world, a Sword Saint is a superhuman who has reached the upper limits of circulation, the rare few who have unlocked complete awakening. It is a supreme title bestowed upon those who have attained the absolute pinnacle of swordsmanship. In the Empire's long history, only a rare few have reached that peak. The swordsmen all over the Empire, they are nothing short of a god. Such a legendary figure is standing before Lucian. The young master's jaw dropped to the floor. You don't meet a god every day. After all, Sword Saint Eisen Brinter looks like an old man with a head full of white hair, dressed in casual training garb. He gave Lucian a polite bow. It has been a few years since they last met. At Lucian's birthday banquet, he courteously introduced himself, as if he weren't one of the most recognizable fighters in the realm. Hans did mention that Lucian was assigned to learn swordsmanship from a knight who had served House Valdec for 2 generations. That attendant of his conveniently left out the part where that knight is. The damn Sword Saint Lucian had to stop himself from fanboying, and returned the courtesy with a noble bow, expressing how great an honor it would be to learn from the Sword Saint himself. Eisen chuckled upon hearing such a stuffy greeting. He insisted that he's nothing more than a mere old man, hidden behind an overstated title. Now furthermore, a candidate to become the next head of a great house should not bow his head so easily. Lucian argued that, even though it's his duty to uphold the family's dignity, he would never lax in his etiquette towards someone as esteemed as the Sword Saint, regardless of their roles as master and vassal. Eisen is a man worthy of the utmost respect. Seeing the kid go all starry-eyed made the old man feel a little awkward. He relented and let the young lord proceed however he finds most comfortable. Without wasting another second, the first session of their training officially began. Eisen directed Lucian to run laps around the outdoor training ground. Before he could finish giving the first assignment, the young lord was already gearing up to run. With utmost enthusiasm he looked to his instructor for the green light. Stunned by his eagerness, the old man asked him to wait a moment. Eisen was confused as to why the kid didn't ask any questions. Why was he running? How far should he run? What's the meaning behind this specific exercise? Most noble children would pelt him with the same old questions, before going full tilt of course. Lucian was curious, but he assumed that he was ordered to run because it was necessary. He believes that a disciple should simply follow their master's word, and trust the process. Eisen noted the distinct difference between the look in Lucian's eyes, compared to that of other young lords. The child possesses a pure and honest longing for the sword. He finally understands what the Duke meant in that meeting. Without any more pauses, he gave Lucian the go signal to go wild and run the laps. With a passionate smile on his face, Lucian stepped out onto the sunlit training ground. While he loops the whole field, Eisen quietly watched from afar. Lucian was taking the simple task of running around in circles. Very seriously, his every step was evenly paced, gradually increasing in speed. In truth, there was another reason why he followed Master Eisen's order. Without a second thought, he already deduced the true purpose of this run. He was given a mundane, physical task to gauge his aptitude as a disciple. In other words, it's a test to see if he has the spark. Lucian knows this because he used to employ a similar tactic. Back when he was a mercenary captain, he would give new recruits trivial tasks, chores that no one else wanted to do, and watch on the sidelines. Just by observing their reaction and attitude towards the menial task at hand, a master can learn quite a lot about a newbie. Ready to ace this simple test, Lucian showed his resolve by giving the undertaking 100. He remained mindful of Eisen, watching his every micro-decision, since he already showed the Sword Saint his impeccable mindset with a fairly decent answer. Only one thing remains to be proven. That is grit today. Lucian aims to run until his wheels fall off and inevitably collapse. That was the plan, but after 1 hour into the exercise, he started to feel that something was seriously off. He's been running at full tilt for 60 minutes now, but he couldn't feel a hint of fatigue. If anything, the more he ran, the better he felt with every loop around the training ground. His body felt a little lighter and nimbler. It was a truly bizarre experience. All he's done to recover his broken body thus far is consume the mass-produced nectar. The only exercise he's done is his light walks around the castle. By this time even the Sword Saint noticed the oddity. He only wanted to gauge the young lord's overall physical condition. He didn't really have high expectations, yet the kid demonstrated some monstrous stamina. Given Lucian's history, this type of performance defies all logic. Not a single bead of sweat had dropped from his body. His breathing remains as calm as a still lake, even for knights who have trained their mana for years. This level of composure is unheard of. Growing antsy from passively watching from afar, the Sword Saint realized something before he arrived. The young lord was sitting in a meditative trance. To confirm his hunch, Master Eisen stepped into the field. With one fluid motion he ordered Lucian to stop. Ending the exercise, the young lord worried that something had happened, or that he had done something wrong. In front of him, the Sword Saint was exuding pure mana all over his body. Eisen wanted to ask the young lord one thing before they continued. He inquired whether the exercise Lucian had performed earlier to compose his body and mind was circulation, not mere meditation. Seeing no point in hiding his practices, the young lord confirmed the Sword Saint's hunch. He employs mana circulation, since there is nothing better for clearing one's thoughts. With confirmation, Eisen asked for permission to conduct an examination of Lucian's physical condition. For a moment, he held the boy's hand and suggested that Lucian stay still, even if he feels some strange sensations. With expert precision and control, Master Eisen steadily guided his mana to penetrate through the young lord's wrist. In doing so, he gained access to the boy's circulation paths. The examination lasted an uncomfortably long time. Finally, the Sword Saint pinpointed the reason for Lucian's superhuman stamina. As the old man expected, young Lord Lucian had already reached the final stage of circulation. They're basically on the same level. But that isn't the end of it. The boy had touched the realm beyond the theoretical limit, that even a Sword Saint like Eisen never could. This child is actively opening a new path, beyond what was thought possible. After completing the examination, Eisen just silently stood motionless for a moment. He gently reeled his mana back to his body, and let go of the young lord's hand. With trembling hands, he asked how long Lucian had been practicing circulation, and when he reached the final stage of the process. The young lord was genuinely stunned by the odd question, clearly clueless about what he had achieved. According to the Sword Saint's evaluation, the purity of his mana was akin to fresh snow on a winter field, pristine and untainted. His core was perfectly formed to maximize mana efficiency, much like a perpetually moving water wheel. He's touched upon a realm that only a handful of warriors reach. Some people have trained their entire lives, yet can never hope to catch up. Lucian expected something of this sort, but he didn't expect that. He was already close to a state of completion. If that's the case, there's no need to hide anything from his new master anymore. He has a ton of questions about his own condition, questions that only someone like the Sword Saint could answer. Lucian confessed that about a month ago, he began intuitively circulating his mana, and found that all his pathways had been opened. From the very start, he heard that circulation was supposed to be accompanied by pain and blockages. Still, he didn't experience any resistance or discomfort. This kid far exceeded the Sword Saint's expectations. Considered a genius, he only reached the apex after decades of endurance. Looking at the young lord, perhaps the mythical swordsman, who can cleave mountains and part the seas, were not mere myths at all. Maybe they really existed. Eisen turned serious and requested permission to speak plainly. At the risk of being insolent, he asked if young Lord Lucian would consider giving up his claim as the successor of House Valdec, to take a different path. Lucian was freaked out by the old man's suggestion. Why would he give up his newly acquired position as successor? He worried that something might be wrong with his body. Maybe he can't learn sword techniques, or something terrible might happen if he uses mana. Eisen assured him that it is quite the opposite of his worries. he plainly stated that Lucian's body is the epitome of the ideal vessel. Not only can he push the efficiency of his mana and body beyond theoretical limits, but he also possesses the potential to see beyond the peak and break common sense. In other words, if the young lord were to focus solely on honing his sword, becoming the Sword Saint would be well within his reach in record time. As a man who yearned for the pinnacle of swordsmanship, being told that he could become a Sword Saint was a dream come true. He knew that Lucian's body was extraordinary. This was far beyond even his wildest dreams. Thanks to the luck of being able to learn the Lionheart sword, Lucian thought he had found the path to make his impossible dreams come true. Who would have thought that he had the potential to look beyond that, level a direct path to the pinnacle of the sword? Given that Aizen was making him choose between the family and sword sainthood, rather than walking both paths simultaneously, the process must truly be arduous. Master Aizen confirmed that he can only focus on one route. To be precise, the old man simply does not have much time left in this world. Thanks to the power of circulation, he can still move his old bones despite being nearly 100 years old, but Father Time comes for all. He can no longer deny the gradual aging of his physical body, to pass everything on to the next Sword Saint. While he's still breathing, even focusing solely on the sword would barely be enough. If Lucian's memory serves him right, the Sword Saint is set to pass away in 8 years. It is true that they don't have much time. In his heart, Lucian wanted to accept Master Aizen's offer and just focus on the sword. However, the coming age of chaos will bring about a world that cannot be navigated with martial power. Alone those who would survive the pandemonium that would sweep the entire continent possessed legitimacy and nobility. Though the moment he longed for had opened its door, he must think of the bigger picture. He apologized to Sir Aizen. He ultimately chose to remain a Valdec until the very end. The Sword Saint has given him an offer far beyond his current station, a commitment he cannot accept. Thankfully, the old man understood his reservations. He was the one who put the kid in such a difficult position. He lamented wasting his youth, only to grow greedy now that he's near death's door. In some way, he wanted to leave a lasting legacy through Lucian when he's gone. Seeing the old man ponder over his long life and legacy, an idea came to mind. He asked the Sword Saint what he would do if someone else with real talent appeared. Someone other than him, far from the Valdec estate. In the middle of the woods, sounds of a galloping horse could be heard. Riding the mighty stallion was a young man wearing noble fabrics. His horseback training was interrupted by an attendant running hurriedly onto the open field. The attendant huffed and puffed for air as he delivered news regarding the third son of the Valdec family. The young noble halted his stallion aggressively. He couldn't believe that the ridiculous stories he heard were actually true. The fourth son of House Valdec, Joshua Valdec, refused to accept that his moronic brother was recognized as a new candidate gunning for the head of the house position. His attendant elaborated that the rumors were confirmed. His Highness the Grand Duke had just made the announcement. Furthermore, young Lord Lucian is undergoing swordsmanship training under the guidance of Sir Aizen. Joshua was exasperated all his life. He's only seen his brother as a nuisance. It's already hard enough to build a support base while being squeezed by his two older brothers. Now even the neutral factions have a new option to rally behind. He would have preferred it if Lucian had just continued rotting away. In his room, his attendant advised him to watch his words. How could Joshua stay calm when the support he barely scraped together could waver at any moment? It's infuriating enough having to call Lucian his elder brother when there's only a few months difference between them. The confirmation of the third young lord as a successor candidate pushed him to his wits' end. There must be a way to show his qualifications as well. Since Lucian had recently started learning the sword, he'll be needing a sparring partner soon. He tasked his attendant to prepare a couple of sharp swords. Joshua wanted none of that wooden shit. He needed real steel. He'll just have to show his sickly elder brother that nothing has changed. Lil Bro thinks he's the main character. Back in the training grounds, Lucian is trying to sell the idea of an alternate disciple to the Sword Saint. Although it might take some time to find the prime candidate he had in mind, the man's talent could more than make up for the delay. He promised to bring a student worthy of accepting Sir Aizen's legacy, even 100 years into the future. The old man didn't want to unintentionally leave the young lord with such a heavy burden. It is enough for him that such a talented child would think of him so fondly. The Sword Saint politely thanked the young lord for the kind words and the offer as expected. Lucian's proposal must have sounded like nonsense. To the seasoned veteran, the so-called renowned swordsman don't even catch his eye. It's only natural that Sir Eisen would doubt Lucian's claim to produce a comparable talent to his own, even though the Sword Saint rejected the idea. The young lord intends to deliver. If Lucian Valdez' body is a heaven-sent vessel, recognized by the Sword Saint, there must also be someone who could rival his potential. In the past, despite having a meager physical stature and a lack of proper sword form training, he knew of a man who could slaughter battalions of fully equipped knights. In the blink of an eye, through pure instinct and talent alone, he became the embodiment of the sword, sweeping across battlefields. His blade tasted the blood of countless foes, despite being nerfed from birth. A man that Lucian deeply respects, the sword demon Felix. The young lord had already set his eyes on recruiting Felix. With enough sharpening, that guy could become his strongest vassal. It would be fitting to bring him under the tutelage of Sir Eisen. The topic of legacies aside, Lucian's own training cannot lag behind. The Sword Saint brought out a target dummy and handed him a wooden sword. Before they begin formal lessons on sword forms, the old man wanted to see what Lucian's current skill level was. Against the wooden dummy, he must perform a vertical strike, a horizontal strike, and a diagonal strike in that exact order. Given his experience in practicing circulation, mana manipulation should be a breeze. For the final strike, the Sword Saint wants to see Lucian go all out with a killing blow, infused with mana. His first time holding a sword in a new body was a weird experience. He'll need to consciously control his strength to some extent. Thankfully, the old Lucian had received sword lessons as a kid. Gripping the wooden sword steadfastly, he focused on the wooden dummy. His gaze sharpened and all the muscles in his body tightened. Using raw strength and technique, he unleashed a devastating vertical strike. He immediately followed the flawless attack with a smooth, horizontal strike to complete the trifecta of angles. The destructive diagonal strike capped off the basics. Finally, he started cooking up the attack that the Sword Saint really wanted to see. Lucian infused his pristine mana into the sword, making his wood as stiff and sharp as steel. His eyes mapped out the trajectory of attack with deadly precision. He looked at the wooden dummy as if it owed him money. Swinging the wooden sword from the bottom to the top, he beheaded the dummy from afar. Killing blow drained the air out of the arena as the severed wooden dummy head hit the floor. In 4 strikes, he showed the Sword Saint that he got that dog in him. He took all his focus and energy to put on a show. Being the first time pushing his new body to the limits, he felt unsatisfied with his output, but it's not too bad for a beginner's display. Lucian wondered whether Sir Eisen would become even more demanding now. Surprisingly, the old man remained stone-faced. With a chuckle, he admitted that the young lord surprised him once again. To put his performance into words, he described it as utterly pathetic. The young lord thought he was about to be showered with praise, only to receive a pointed insult. Sir Eisen does not know the reason, but Lucian is chock full of bad habits when swinging the sword. It was like he never learned the core principles, the very basics of swordsmanship. In simpler terms, he swings like a mercenary, desperate only for survival. He focuses solely on power and speed. The balance between his body and mana was off. For those reasons, the natural sharpness of the sword is dulled, and wide gaps appear between every movement. Furthermore, he took an embarrassingly long time to infuse the sword with mana. For the final blow, by Lucian's count, he channeled mana into the blade in about 1 or 2 seconds tops. You must recognize that those 1 or 2 seconds of vulnerability are more than enough time for a decent opponent to take his head. In the case of the Sword Saint, he only needs a fraction of that to decapitate the young lord's head. For this first lesson, Lucian must begin by understanding the weight of mere seconds. In a fight, that fleeting moment could be the deciding factor between victory and death. He didn't even realize that the old man had moved until the tip of his wood touched Lucian's neck. Lucian was forced to reckon with the fact that there are levels to this shit. He was a fool. He could have died a second time without even noticing. He was too busy enjoying the sweet life of a high-born young lord, which made him complacent. With utmost sincerity, Lucian vowed to take this valuable lesson to heart and work tirelessly to correct his bad habits and mindset. First Sir Eisen wisely ruminated that even a gifted body can never be omnipotent. One cannot defeat an experienced mana user by relying on brute force. Alone dissonance between body and mana leads to wasted energy. It creates exploitable gaps and invites crisis. To draw out the true power of a blade, the internal and external forces must form a single flow. True power is born from that harmony. To demonstrate, the old man unleashed a simple, lightning-quick strike against the wooden dummy. First it seemed like his attack didn't leave a single scratch on the dummy's surface. Then suddenly the whole thing burst into a million little pieces, scattering all over the arena. This is the path of the sword that the young lord must walk from now on. A few days have passed since their first training session. The master and student have moved from dummy practice to practical sparring while Lucian goes all out with every attack. Sir Eisen blocks exclusively with one hand. Even with the handicap, the old man continues to teach him a combination of theory and practice. He constantly reminded the young lord that the flow of mana must remain uninterrupted. Physical training sharpens movements. The goal is to reach the level of instinctive mana control, akin to breathing while using mana to constantly reinforce the body. He must reserve enough power to be channeled elsewhere at a moment's notice. If he can laser focus on the right place at the right time, Lucian will be unstoppable. Incorporating everything the old man had taught him, over the past few days the young lord boldly attacked from above, but was thwarted once more. Sir Eisen kept going on and on, about aligning the elements in perfect harmony, and the essence of the sword, while calmly dismantling his student in a lopsided spar. A perfect parry sent Lucian flying back to the other side of the arena. He considered jumping the old man one more time, but the fatigue of going all out non-stop had finally caught up to him. While he was trying to catch his breath, the sword saint imbued his training sword with mana, and dared his poor student to defend as best as he could. This time, Sir Eisen wanted to raise the stakes of their little spar just a bit. Lucian must calculate the enemy's speed and trajectory, then respond with the precise amount of force required to counter. With insufficient time to decode the assignment, the sword saint went at him at breakneck speed. The young lord stayed calm and recalled his master's teachings. Must be in unity with nature, much like flowing water through this. He might just be able to bridge the gap in an enemy's form. Next up is minimizing wasted energy. To exert maximum power, he must never be overwhelmed by the pace. With his eyes glued forward, the lessons that have been drilled into his body and mind finally bore fruit, as he infuses mana into his wooden sword at record time, meeting Sir Eisen's devastating attack. At the right angle and the right time, he was able to successfully parry the sword aimed at his head. For the first time since he started properly learning the way of the sword, he didn't feel helpless. The perfect mana of the genius and the effortless power of the sword saint collided. Sir Eisen held on to the clash as he evaluated the young lord. Having seen enough, he gently pulled his wooden sword away, diffusing the impact. He decided to call it a day and concluded the training session. For now, Lucian must carve the sensation he felt today deep into his very soul. If he can do that, he'll be considered a first-class swordsman. The young lord awkwardly laughed. This old man's instructions are easier said than done. Forget about etching the feeling into his soul. He couldn't even feel his legs leading to a clumsy fall. Completely drained from such intense training, the young lord thanked his master from the bottom of his heart. Around them the arena had been partially demolished. These days laborers are regularly called to repair the damage done to the training grounds. Every time the laborers come in, the place just looks worse and worse. They couldn't even picture what kind of training the young lord has been undergoing to warrant this level of destruction. Fresh out of sparring with the sword saint, Lucian had to take a minute sitting on his ass to recover from the torturous pace. He was just thankful that he survived today's session. Who would have thought that the old man's harsh method would ultimately erase a lifetime of bad habits he racked up from his mercenary days? Being tortured in the arena every single day is what it takes to break him down and build him up. Then so be it. The pain only serves to accelerate his understanding of concepts. Quickly, the more he sees Sir Eisen, the deeper his admiration for the sword saint becomes. This old man constantly creates crises, tailored to the young lord's current skill level, to elicit a perfect reaction, paired with sharp instructions. Lucian is well aware that what Sir Eisen does is far easier said than done. He has a constant and accurate read of his student's body, Simply entrusting the body to be molded by his teachings can bring about tangible progress every day. Until now, Lucian thought that the secret to a great sword form was a non-stop grind. For a higher realm, he never considered the concepts of balance, reserve power and flow as he does now. The most important element of the process was already within him. If he had known these teachings in his previous life, things would surely have gone differently. In his final face-off against the commander-in-chief, his sword could have gotten much closer to that man. Even now he still remembers the vivid details of his death and defeat. Running a theoretical bout in his mind, he wouldn't have gone down without a fight. Perhaps he could even surprise the commander. With a more well-rounded understanding of the sword, the stain of his overwhelming L remains in Lucian's head. Now that he's recovered enough, he feels like stopping his training here would be a waste. If he can find a suitable opponent somewhere nearby, perhaps he could gauge his progress against a more fitting adversary. The gods immediately gave him what he was looking for. His little brother Joshua Valdec marched his way into the training ground with an attendant in tow. Ignoring Lucian, Joshua paid his respects to Sir Isin. This boy had the nerve to call himself the Sword Saint's disciple. Out of nowhere, the Sword Saint remained cordial, and asked why the fourth young master paid him an unexpected visit. He politely insisted that Joshua return at a later date, since he's occupied with young Lord Lucian's training. The impudent child's attendant couldn't stop his young master from barging in and stealing the limelight. In so many words, Joshua declared that since his elder brother had committed to training, he had only come here to assist with practice, as a younger brother with far more experience with the sword. Based on the little shit's insulting smile, it was clear that he's just talking out of his ass. Nevertheless, Lucian was elated. The perfect opponent had just arrived. He can finally pass down the agony he suffered over the past few days. The Sword Saint just stood in position, befuddled by the fourth young master's request. Out of the blue, how exactly could this kid help with Lucian's training? Joshua wishes to petition for a sparring session against his brother, to gauge both of their proficiency in the practical application of mana circulation. His smile looked innocent, but anybody with half a brain could tell that he was scheming. Underneath that grin, he even claimed that given the current timing, they simply do not have time to interact as brothers. If not at a time when they're both available, like right now, it would be hard to find another opportunity. Joshua recognized that his request may come across as impolite, but he's just a little bro who wants to tussle with big bro. For a little bit, Lucian could barely hold his laughter upon hearing Joshua's spin on the scenario. The seeds of this household were truly gifted with silver tongues. Hearing the boy use interacting and brotherly bonding as an excuse was laughable. Joshua showed up unannounced and brought a real sword in front of an older brother who hadn't even had a full week of formal lessons. It was just too shameless and transparent that it almost felt innocent. When his goal is obviously to crush and solidify a competitor, to solidify his own position by hiding under the pretext of helping a big brother, he believes he could worm his way in. If the Sword Saint observes, it will add to the weight of the spar and its conclusion. Lucian's reputation had degraded so much that a greenhorn, whose peach fuzz had barely grown, is trying to keep him in check. The young lord knows Sir Isen's stand on the succession battle. Joshua just put the old man in an awkward position to stop further implicating his honorable master. Lucian stepped in to accept his little brother's proposal. He initially played the fool and praised the family's youngest for having such a kind and admirable heart. Then he mischievously stomped on Joshua's claims. He can't just overlook such rotten behavior. Such nonsensical eloquence would never fly in this house. It simply cannot be overlooked. To personally educate the family's immature baby, Lucian is willing to step into the arena. However, today is the last day that he will indulge such childish tantrums. He'd never forgive this boy if he ever puts her eyes in a difficult position any longer. Sword Saint could tell that his student had picked up on Joshua's real intentions and decided to break through the bullshit head on. Ultimately, blood is a bond that can't be broken. Sir Isen gave his blessing, letting the brother duke it out. However, this will be the last time this happens. If he judged the spar too dangerous, he would step in to break it up immediately. Both the fourth and third young masters swore to keep the Sword Saint's rules set in mind. Lucian ruffled Joshua's head ominously and wished for a wonderful spar with the youngest. With a fake laugh, the fourth young master replied with thinly veiled hostility. Both fighters took to the stage facing each other. while the sword saint officiated in the middle. He reminded the boys that this fight is not intended to harm each other, but merely a spar to confirm what they have learned. Lucian must approach the bout with an attitude of learning, as this is his first formal spar. Joshua, on the other hand, must bear responsibility as a senior who took up the way of the sword. First, the old man implored them to fight without bringing shame. To the honorable name of House Valdec, to signal that they're ready, both brothers drew their blades, gripping the handles of their respective swords. The young masters eyed each other intensely. Joshua wasn't used to Lucian acting like an older brother and standing up for himself. Every time he emphasized that he was older, Joshua took some mental damage he really could not bear. The few months gap that made this guy his older brother. At least he's done with the hard part. He wormed his way in, and he can stop Lucian from flapping his mouth by the end of the spar. In Joshua's mind, this is not about who was born first. It's about who's truly the superior talent. At this point, he was barely hiding his disdain and viciousness. He was showing expressions one wouldn't even make against a mortal enemy, directing his complete attention to the steel sword in his hands. Lucian felt right at home with the cool and heavy sensation it brought. It has been 2 months, and a whole lifetime since he last wielded a real weapon. If it were back in his mercenary days, he would have probably used all sorts of dirty tricks to win against a noble brat. But today he will proudly fight, with a style befitting the Valdec family's third young lord. If in the heat of the battle, he happens to use a sword technique he learned from his past life, the old man would surely notice. Even though Joshua is a sinister and cunning snake, Lucian must keep in mind that this little one is just a naive kid, who doesn't know how the world truly works yet. He really wanted to keep this spar appropriate as a big bro courtesy. Still, Joshua decided to talk shit, asking where his earlier confidence had gone. The fourth young master interpreted his sneaking glances as fear. He reckoned that with a real sword in hand, the shame of the family must be feeling the heat now. He even cited that, though major accidents often occur in real sword spars, such incidents occur only when the fighter's skills are somewhat evenly matched. A little shit suggested that they could give Lucian some training wheels by swapping back to wooden swords. That won't be necessary though. He really wanted to keep this whole ordeal appropriate, but it sounds like Joshua really wanted to experience real pain. For a sibling who won't listen, a good-ass whooping is the only effective cure. Once more he referred to the little shit as youngest, enunciating every syllable for maximum mental damage. The easily provoked Joshua shifted his weight onto his lower body, ready to attack. He sped up and tried to close the distance with quick and heavy steps. His only desire is to make Lucian regret his words, through unadulterated violence. Lucian tightened up his form and anticipated the attack as expected. Teaching his brother a lesson with self-imposed restrictions won't be easy at the end of the day. And Joshua had also received teachings from the Sword Saint. His fundamentals in movement are not at a level to be taken lightly at all. Furthermore, Lucian is still feeling fatigued from exhausting most of his mana from the spar with Sir Eisen earlier. And thankfully, there is no hiding Joshua's severe lack of experience. He fell for such light provocation so easily. Lucian geared up and infused his lower body with mana. He properly applied the Sword Saint's teachings on simultaneously, focusing power and mana circulation, just a few meters separating him from a pissed-off little brother. A single-leg mana infusion should suffice. When he finally stepped forward, the burst of speed produced a deafening sound akin to a gunshot. By outrightly beating Joshua in a speed battle, Lucian will make the split-second opening his. Sir Eisen's eyes widened with a look of concern. The jaws of Joshua's attendants almost fell on the floor. Looming above his little brother, Lucian guided Joshua to grit his teeth and block as best as he could. Failure to do so might cost him a tongue. Lucian's sword completed a whole arc of motion, with unstoppable momentum, while actively talking trash to his baby brother.